Welcome to our live stream. This is a pre-show of our N10-009 Network Plus study group. Hello, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. Hello, chat room. Hello, everybody who is here live. We're doing a Wednesday study group. This is, I think this was the original schedule for this study group, which this month is saying something. I don't know if that's true or not. I moved a couple. There's so much movement in the schedule right now that I'm not sure. I know when we're supposed to be here, which is now. But the challenge is, of course, making sure that you know when the schedule is, which is now. So everybody is here. Let's check our stream settings. I guess I can pause that there. Yeah, folks are checking in. There's the chat room. Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing? Nice to have you here. Hello, Mal. Good to see you. You're in there today. We missed you. You're noticeable in you're being missed. We're here. We got a lot going on today, too. Okay, stream is good. Let's check things here. Yep, we are recording down here. You can see my Cylon down here in the bottom right side. I'm hiding him from view. There he is. I guess a lower third would be good so that you can answer the question that is there. So there's the fun part of what we are doing. Well, we got a lot going on in the chat room. Why can't you access our Discord? I don't know. Why can't you? That's one of those things. If you think there's a problem, there's an error message or something popping up on your screen, you can check in with folks from Discord. Is it support.discord.com? It's one of those. There's a support link on the Discord website. Maybe they can help you out. Maybe it's filtered. Maybe it's an old app. Maybe, I don't know. It doesn't work. I get those tickets not working. Okay, we'll need a little bit more information. I guess that's really one good part about taking these courses is you sort of get the idea, you get the order, the process, you understand what it means when people are having a problem, and you know there's certain things you should be helping with. I feel like I'm a better person asking for support now, because when I ask for support, I'm always giving them a detailed description of here's what I did. Here's the error message I saw. Here's a screenshot. Screenshots are amazing. Screenshots are one of the best things you can provide from a troubleshooting perspective. I would say most of the screenshots that I've worked with solve the problem immediately. Like, oh, I know what that is. It's like magic. And I put it on my tickets. If you post a screenshot, it will help amazingly. And it does. Because you never know. There's so much that can go wrong, of course, which is the beauty of these certifications. It's why you're here getting it. Let's check some cameras. They look good. I'm looking over what we got here. Birdcam, Studio, Mac Pro. All these are working. These are pretty good. If you're still having problems with the Discord, you're more than welcome to send me a note. We're using the Contact Us link at the top of our website. Make sure you provide information on your Discord username and a screenshot, which would be good too. What is it doing? In fact, it was the last live stream we did. One of I think it was a performance-based question, and it asked a user saw an error message, didn't write it down, didn't make a note of it, doesn't remember what it said. What do you do? That's Tuesday. That's a normal day. That's what that is. You do what you do every day, which is go to the logs. It always seems like go to the logs and get a packet capture is 99% of solving problems. It just seems that way. It seems most of the time when somebody's saying, here's a thing, well, let me go look at the logs. Maybe that I'm coming a little bit too far from my cybersecurity / IT security role that I used to have, where everything was in the logs. Everything was there. So we were constantly going. It's not quite as easy in Windows or Linux or Mac OS, but there is a log and you can get information from that. So it's not beyond the pale. It's something that we sort of do a lot. But it seems like we don't do it enough, or people don't think to go there enough. We just want to fix it. We're just throwing stuff at the wall. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? There's no basis to the suggestion. We're just asking if you tried that. That does happen. Today is all Network Plus, by the way. This is our Network Plus study group. I guess I need a lower third for some of these things. We'll add a lower third in there someday. And all new questions for Network Plus. I have all new performance-based question for Network Plus. We've got, and of course, you can put your questions in. If you'd like me to answer your question, you can submit it at any time using that same link you see on your screen just behind me, professormesser.com/QA. It's not just the link you go to answer a question. It's also the link you go to if you want to ask a question. There's a little tab at the top, and you can flip over to that. We got about 5 minutes or so, 5 minutes and 10 seconds before we get started on the live stream. Really 4 minutes and 10 seconds. What am I talking about? Math. It's math, people. That's the problem. If we could just get rid of math, think of all the things that would be solved. Think of all the issues that would just go away. See how easy that is? So we've got also another live stream this month, but we skip a week. So if you go past next week, the Wednesday of the following week, is it a Wednesday? We're doing our Security Plus study group. I'll have a calendar at the end of this. AJ in the chat room just had all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed the other day. So this is a good distraction from the pain. See, this is only slightly less painful than getting 4 wisdom teeth removed, thankfully. So that's what that really works out to be. That is really something. I had 2 of my wisdom teeth removed back in the day, back when I was a young lad, but they were only able to get the bottoms. So the top ones, still there. They're just going to be there forever. They're my friends now. They're not causing a problem, so they're just there. And it's one of those things. And they absolutely do not contain wisdom. If anything, I was less smart going in, and they took them out. I'm like, oh, okay, I know not to do that again. See, maybe that's what they mean by getting your wisdom teeth out. Once you do it, you realize you should have been wiser and not done that. That's not true. There's good reasons to have your wisdom teeth out. Mine were they just didn't want to get out of there. So that's the way it goes. We have, so there's a little tidbit from me to you. There's a little more information about me. Worthless information that you can't use anywhere, that costs you nothing and earns you nothing. We strive for that exactly here. Hopefully the rest of this study group will be much more informational than my dental history. I think in general, a challenge. So I am glad, please, if you've just had your wisdom teeth removed, relax, grab, like AJ, grab a something without a straw. You cannot use a straw. No using a straw. Don't do that. Make sure you're getting lots of liquids. Make sure you're taking care and you're swishing with the things they tell you to swish with. Those are going to be important over the next couple of weeks. So coming from that, you do not want what they call a dry socket. That's not what you want. So make sure you follow your doctor's instructions. Follow your physician's instructions, and you'll be good. They always scare you about that, and they should. It's not a fun thing, so don't do that. I did not have a dry socket. It needs to heal up. Everything needs to be good. So there you go. Thanks for joining us for medical talk, our dental talk. Maybe we should shift gears into IT a bit. I've been watching quite a bit going on the IT side right now. There's been a lot of cybersecurity stuff this past week or two. Been really interesting things going on. And just a remarkable amount of data that's been lost, both through direct attacks and unintended circumstances. I don't say unintended. I guess if you put an AI in charge of your data and it gets deleted, that's on you, brother. That is all you. I don't know why you did that, but you did it. Those are real things happening. So it's very interesting we have that. Maybe we'll talk about that in our Security Plus study group in a couple of weeks. That'll be fun. You can ask questions in the chat, but best place if you want to ask a question for me to answer will be to use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. There's a tab at the top, and you can flip over there. In the second hour, I will be going through those questions, hopefully answering some of them. So that's a great place to send me a question. Oh, look, it changed to 12. That means it's time for a live stream. Let's go to our keynote. Let's get a green light. Do we have a green light? Do we have? If I click it right there, we go. That's a green light. This will do a thing right there. Love it. And that means I think we're ready for a live stream. Doesn't it sound like fun? Let's make sure. I didn't even check our graphics. See if the graphics work right. Now, no better time than the present, right? And away we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Network Plus Study Group. It is the Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group for May 2026. Thank you so much for joining us. I am James Messer. I will be your host for this first hour of Q&A, where I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives for Network Plus. And then in the second hour, I will open up the lines, or I guess the chat. You can, of course, leave a question for me at any time regarding that, and you'll be able to get some questions answered for me in the second hour. You can ask questions about IT, you can ask questions about technology, or you can ask questions. Dental questions came up in the pre-show. You never know what you're going to get on a live stream here. We're going to try to avoid some of those dental questions. Let's kind of stick to the technology side of things. If you would like to answer the questions that we have today, we would love for you to join us at the link you see on your screen. If you are here live, simply pop open a new browser window and head over to professormesser.com/QA. That is the link you will use to not only answer the questions in this first hour, but also ask questions in the second hour. That is the one place you go. It's a one page. You just stay right there. You don't have to type anything else in. That's all you have to do. And if you go to that link and it is working the way it should be, then you should see a question appearing on your screen as soon as I click it. That question is one from last study group. So this is one that follows the same rules that we will use throughout the study group. The rules are: please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, use the link that is on your screen. I'm begging. You can see professormesser.com/QA. That is where you will be able to answer these questions. If you are watching this on a replay, that link will not be available. So you'll hear me say it a million times over the next hour, but none of that is open and available unless you are here on a live stream. What better reason to be here for a live stream? And if you're not sure when the next one will be, make sure you check the calendar on our website at professormesser.com/calendar. Our question from last month, our rewind question, we call it. This is the only repeat question you're going to see today, is: a city's traffic control system relies on a complex network of sensors and lights which must remain operational at all times. Which of the following best describes this infrastructure? Is it VLAN, IoT, BYOD, OT, or PCI DSS? It's one of those, of course. If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. Instead, use the link that is on your screen right here. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. We're going to come back to that question in just a moment. Thanks so much for joining us on our study group. This is something we do every month, just kind of fun to go through questions. I create them during the week, and then we are able to answer them live and online. It's great that we're able to all vote on what we think the right question is, and then we can see how well we might know some of this content. But of course, we're not doing live streams all the time. Our entire Network Plus course is available to watch for free on our YouTube channel, so you can go over there at professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget that we have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question that you can get on X, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and other places. You can find those, of course, by typing in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us. So professormesser.com/Instagram takes you to my page on Instagram. See how that works? So just fill in the name of your favorite social media site at the end of that. And hopefully I have a link that will take me there. If there isn't one, let me know, and we'll have to add one to the site and make that happen. Today, we're going to talk all about Network Plus. That is our topic for the day. This Network Plus exam is called the N10-009. That's the version of the exam. They tend to change these every 3.5 years or so. So you'll see the numbers increment through the years. But right now, we're on the N10-009. This was released on June the 20th of 2024, which means we estimate the retirement date for Network Plus to be somewhere around the end of the calendar year in 2027. So we're still a 1.5 years away before ever seeing Network Plus go away. So if you are someone studying and all of your study materials say the N10-009, you're studying from the right version. This is a single exam that you need to pass, not multiple exams, thankfully. It's a single exam that they give you 90 minutes and a maximum of 90 questions, which means you could get fewer than 90 questions. On a scale from 100 to 900, which is the scale they use for this exam, you need to score at least a 720 to have passed this exam. The exam itself consists of different kinds of questions. The bulk of the exam are multiple choice questions, and then we also have performance-based questions. We'll talk about performance-based questions in just a bit. Not only do we have our video course available for you online, it is our full and complete video course covering every single topic from the CompTIA exam objectives. We also have other study materials on our website which may help, things like our course notes, our exam hacks ebook. You get some exclusive access to our study group, so you can ask questions in there as well. If you'd like to learn more about those, they're on our website at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Also let you know that we have a replay of this live stream available on YouTube immediately after we're done. So you can head over to YouTube and watch it. Once I hit the stop button, it takes a few minutes for it to be processed on the YouTube side, and then it's automatically made available. I also create replay links on my website to make it a little bit easier to find in a single index. We also have an audio-only version of the replay that I create, and I post it as a podcast format, so you can add it to your favorite podcast listening program, and we'll simply download those automatically to whatever device you have that set to. We also post these on a number of streaming media sites. So if you're on Spotify, for example, you can go to Spotify and simply search for Professor Messer, and you'll see all of those podcast feeds show up there for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. If you'd like to add them manually, you can always go to professormesser.com/podcast. About a day after we're done here, you'll notice that our YouTube video description will be updated with a number of timestamps that correlate to the things that we do today. I obviously can't put those in beforehand because I don't know what the times are. That's the way time works. So instead, my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this in the replay, hi, Lori, probably at 2x speed, she's going through and putting all of these timestamps in there so that you can find the information you need. This is something that you like and you enjoy. Make sure you hit that heart in the chat. Let Lori know that you appreciate her hard work for doing this. And it's something that can really save you a lot of time. You can now go back years with our study groups and find exactly what you want just by clicking one of those to get exactly the information you need at exactly the right time. That is part of our YouTube video description. Also, when I'm not here doing a live stream, I'm over on Discord, just as thousands of other folks are joining our Discord service, and they're studying for A+, they're studying for Network Plus, they're studying for Security Plus, and other certifications. And there's some people in that group in our Discord that already have these certifications. They're just hanging out and helping others. It is a fantastic community of people, such nice folks there. You can find out more about that and join us at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take your Network Plus exam, and you could go over to the CompTIA website and pay full price. But why would you do that when I have exactly the same vouchers on my website at a discount? These vouchers are for North America. So in the view of CompTIA, that is U.S., Canada, and a U.S. territory. So although there are U.S. territories that are not in North America, it's all grouped together as one single U.S. entity. And we have vouchers on our site if you happen to live in those areas. Not only do we have discounted vouchers on our site, if you purchase a voucher from professormesser.com, you get something you can't get anywhere else, and that's a copy of my exam hacks ebook. I've taken all the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years of taking these and many other industry certification exams, and I put all of these tips and tricks into a single book so that you can easily flip through and see this tip or trick for studying. I also have tips and tricks that can help you during the exam itself. So maybe you're able to get a couple of extra points using some of these ideas that I have in my exam hacks ebook. These are the exam hacks that I use for my own exams, and they worked for me. Hopefully they'll work for you too. They're only available with the purchase of a voucher or the purchase of one of our success bundles. Those aren't sold separately, so a relatively exclusive thing to have. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier. which is a city's traffic control system relies on a complex network of sensors and lights which must remain operational at all times. Which of the following best describes this infrastructure? Is it VLAN, IoT, BYOD, OT, or PCI DSS? Let's close our poll and see how you did. 57% of you say the answer is OT, whatever that is. 25% say it's IoT. We also have 9% that said PCI DSS, 7% said VLAN, and only 1% of you said BYOD. Well, with 57% being the majority of you that chose that answer, turns out that is exactly the right answer. That's what we were looking for, was OT, operational technology. Operational technology describes industrial equipment that must be up and running and very often is part of a very important infrastructure. So things like our electrical systems, our electric grid is operational technology. We also have the traffic control systems. Our street lights never stop 24/7 unless you live in Florida like I do and there's a hurricane and the storm comes through and the lights go out, which at that point, for those of you interested, that entire intersection by law turns into a four-way stop. Is it always working as a four-way stop? Well, most of the time, but not always. You have to be very careful when you run into an intersection where the lights are out. But it certainly speaks to how important this operational technology happens to be. Not only do these systems need to be up and running, all of these systems are networked together. There's nothing that is standalone these days, it seems. So you have to make sure that everything is working the way you would expect and working basically 24/7. So it's a little bit different in how you design the network and really working through keeping things running 24 hours a day and protecting this type of equipment, which is a completely different animal in itself. How do you protect an electric grid from an attacker over the network? What about traffic control? What about your manufacturing equipment? Those are important considerations, and it is a type of urgency that is different than maybe your network at home, which makes a lot of sense. So operational technology is what we were looking for. That is the answer. 57% of you chose that one. 25% of you chose IoT, a good number, a quarter of you, the Internet of Things, IoT, which you think kind of describes everything but computers, but it doesn't. It's really talking about much smaller, less critical, non-infrastructure devices. So the camera that is connected to your doorbell, that's Internet of Things. I have a refrigerator and I have a washer and dryer that can connect to the network and give me updates on the temperature inside the refrigerator or if the dryer has finished its particular run. Those types of things are Internet of Things. They don't fall into the category of operational technology. They're really designed as something that's a little more convenient. Taking existing appliances and putting them on the network is Internet of Things. We have 9% of you that said the payment card industry data security system, their data security services and requirements, all about credit card and keeping credit card numbers safe. That is, having a sensors and lights on a traffic control system aren't about credit cards, at least not yet. And once that is something you're considering, you're in a completely different area of security. It really doesn't have anything to do with traffic control systems. We also have VLAN. VLANs are a great way to logically separate networks, especially broadcast domains, within a series of switches. But VLANs are not about an infrastructure that is a traffic control system that has to remain operational. VLANs don't provide any additional uptime or availability just because it's a VLAN. Technically speaking, everything is on a VLAN when you are connected to a switch. So just having an operational technology device on a VLAN doesn't provide anything extra in regards to uptime and availability. And lastly, only 1% said bring your own device, which is a model used by many organizations when you are using your mobile phone, your mobile devices for a company. Instead of the company providing the phone, you provide the phone. You bring your own device, and they can logically partition that device, hopefully, in their mobile device manager, their MDM. So in this case, The majority of you did extremely well on this one. I think we did better than we did last month. So we might be learning some of these newer topics for Network Plus. OT was the answer that is related to a traffic control system relying on a complex network of sensors and lights which must remain operational at all times. And 57% of you got that one absolutely right. If you'd like to learn more about those, they are in my N10-009 course under section 4.1. The name of the video is Segmentation Enforcement. Let's now move to a different kind of question. Now that we've warmed ourselves up with a rewind question, let's think of a different kind of question. And as I mentioned earlier, on your Network Plus exam, you will get a large number of multiple choice questions. That's the one we just did. So you have a question and there are multiple options to choose from. So if you have 5 options like this, and even if you didn't know the answer, you could have guessed, and you had a 20% chance of getting it right. On your exam, there are usually 4 answers. So I make it a little bit harder when we're on our live streams, but on your exam, most of the time, there are 4 answers to choose from. So if you took a guess, 25% chance of getting it right. That's not bad. That's pretty good. So what CompTIA wants to do, though, is make it a little bit more difficult than that. They don't want to give away these points. They want to see if you really know the information. So they will ask the questions in a way that is not multiple choice. And they refer to those types of questions as performance-based questions. Performance-based questions are usually a handful of questions, and they always appear at the beginning of your exam. So don't be thrown by this. The first question that comes up is going to be a performance-based question. Don't let that throw you. You should be expecting that to occur. And I have strategies for people that want to go through those questions immediately. I also have strategies for people that want to skip those questions and come back to it later. I talk about those in my Exam Hacks ebook. So to help us study and practice with a style of performance-based question, I create a new one every month for our live streams. A performance-based question is really just any other type of question. Imagine every possible way of asking a question. Maybe it's one they put you to a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. Maybe you have to put things in a particular order or a particular level of speeds. Maybe you have to drag and drop things on the screen. There's all kinds of ways to ask a question. So any way you can think to ask a question could be a performance-based question. Now, that does make it difficult to study if you're concerned about how the question is being asked. But as I often tell people, don't worry about how the question is posed. If you know the content, you will be able to answer it regardless of how the question is presented. So always focus on the exam objectives. Always, always, always focus on those exam objectives. So I have for you today, I guess it's sort of a matching, sort of a drag and drop in a style of speaking. So this question is our performance-based question of the month, and it asks, identify the DNS record associated with these queries. I know you can't see that because my head's in the way. Associated with these queries. See, we'll just take us right out of the picture. I have 4 different queries on the screen. I'm just going to remove myself so we can do this question here. So I have 4 queries on the screen that people are doing on the network. And then I have 7 different DNS record types on the right side. So for those of you listening on the podcast side, let's step through all of those. The 4 queries are these. The first one is find the IPv6 address of www.professormesser.com. What DNS record is associated or best associated with that query? Next on the list is an incoming email is being directed to the spam gateway. What query is that one? And I realize you're thinking through this. There may be 2 or 3 of those you're thinking about. Narrow it down to the best option here. In fact, the most common option that you will see for these. The third query is an external organization wants to know the authorized email servers for our domain. Which one is that going to be? We also have the web, file, and print servers are different host names, but all use the same IP address. So now those are the 4 different scenarios I want to step through. And there are a number of different ones that we're going to go through. We will figure this out as we go along. But there are 7 different DNS queries that I've listed here. These 7 are DNS records that I've listed here. The 7 records are PTR, A, NS, MX, CNAME, AAAA or quad A, and text, TXT. Those are the 7 record types. I want you to tell me what record type goes with what query. Make sure you read through these queries very carefully so you really understand what's being asked, because some of these you think they could be one thing, but really I might be asking for something else. So make sure you read through them very carefully. A number of you are already getting your answers in. If you think you know these answers, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to be able to answer this question. I know I get to a point when I'm doing these that I want it to be a challenging question, but I also don't want to make it what people tend to think of as a trick question. I'm not trying to trick you with these. I'm being very clear with what I am asking for. You just have to make sure you read through these questions very carefully, that you understand what it is I am asking for, and perhaps why someone might be asking for that. So, like most questions you will get on the exam, CompTIA is trying to have you answer questions really in multiple steps. Here's the question. Based on the question, I need to understand this is what's happening behind the scenes, and therefore, this is going to be the correct answer for that. So they always leave out that part in the middle. Of course, they make it a little bit more challenging. You will very rarely, if ever, on these exams, be asked a direct question. For example, you'll probably never ever see on the exam a question that says, what port numbers does HTTP use? That's not the question. Instead, there will be a scenario where information is being blocked from a web browser. What port number is being blocked in your firewall? It's the same type of question, but they're asking it in a different way that, by the way, did not actually name the protocol as part of the question. So you had to know web browsing, you had to know what protocol web browsing is, and then you had to know what the port number is. See how that works? So multiple steps to get between point A and point B. So let's see, a lot of answers already coming in for this one. So let's see how you did with this question. We're going to break these down. Let's start with the one, I guess, at the very top. Why not? We'll start at the beginning, as most people do. So I want to find the IPv6 address of www.professormesser.com. For those of you wondering, ironically, I don't think I have an IPv6 address associated with www.professormesser.com. So if you've already done an NS lookup query or a dig query on my site, and you're wondering, where's IPv6? There's not one, because nobody's using it. And when they do use it, there's a lot of complications involved there. And to simplify things on our site, at least for the moment, I believe I only have IPv4 bound right now. So in fact, I have to go look. The answer to that particular query, though, is we are looking for a specific kind of record that shows us addresses that are related to IPv6, and that is a quad A address, AAAA. I don't know why we didn't put another couple A's on that. It makes me do a little bit of a flinch there. Like if it's IPv4, wouldn't that be 4 A's? And if it's IPv6, wouldn't it be 6 A's? It's not how we did it. IPv4 is the A record. That's why it's up here. Obviously not using that one in this query of 4. And if it's IPv6, then we are looking for a quad A record. AAAA is the record associated with an IPv6 address. Maybe we're starting easy on that one. I saw the answers that came in. A lot of people got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Next one is a very common configuration in most networks, is that when somebody sends you an email, that email doesn't directly go into your mailbox. It first goes to an email server at your organization. That email server at your organization is probably also a spam gateway, or it probably should be. So when people are sending a mail message to you, they're not sending it to you. They're probably sending it to your spam gateway. Well, how do you tell other places how to get to your email gateway, how to get to the email server for your organization? That's different than trying to get to your web server. That's different than trying to get to other types of servers that are on your network. So the question then becomes, how do you get to a mail server? How do you designate where your mail server is? Mail servers are so incredibly important. And so to be able to do that, we need an MX record. MX is a mail exchange record. And that's what we use on our networks to be able to tell people where you should send our mail to. Mail is such an incredibly important service. It's so dismissed these days in many ways. They're going to text message, they're going to phone calls even. I get a lot of voicemails here. Interestingly enough, I try to direct people from our contact page to send me a message in my inbox, send me a text message even. You can do that from our contact page. It's so much easier to respond back. I can get instant information if I go text message back and forth with folks. It's a great way to provide support, but email is still king. It remains the king of information exchange on the internet. So email is incredibly important to have here. I changed my mail gateway a couple of months ago. You didn't know because it was seamless on the back end, but I moved from one mail provider to a completely different provider. And when you're doing that, there's a lot of thought and process that has to go into place. And one of the things I had to change was my MX record so that everybody else on the internet would know where to send those email messages to be able to get to me. So let's go to the next query that is on our list, and it is an external organization wants to know the authorized email servers for our domain. This is a common problem on the internet, of course, with spam. Spam is an enormous issue when you get into things on the internet because it takes up resources, it takes up time. In some cases, it is a security issue. And so one of the things that we're able to do is when a third party receives an email from us, they can perform a query of our mail server to see if that email really did come from an authorized email server. This is a functionality built into DNS, but it's not really a real specific DNS record. Instead, it is a generic DNS record type that we put specific authorized email information in so that people can find it. And the way that we do that is with a text record. TXT is the record that we are using there. Text records are used to store a lot of different kinds of information in a DNS server. And you may have seen this. If, for example, if a third party, let's say Google, wants to verify that you are the owner of a particular domain, they'll have you create a text record and put some very specific information into that text record because they know the only people that should have access to DNS are the administrators of that domain. That's pretty much how it works across the board. So having a text record provides you with a lot of flexibility. That's also a great place to put in a specific kind of text record, an SPF record that allows people to check to see if an email that they've received from you really did come from an authorized server. And if it didn't, they can then decide, this might not be a legitimate email. Let's throw this in the spam folder. You can pull it out later if it's something that you really do feel is legitimate. In fact, you probably want to contact the owner of that domain and let them know their SPF record is not configured or is missing. They might want to put a list of authorized email servers into that list. And that's why it's also not MX here. They weren't looking just for the name or the IP address of the server. They want to know the authorized email servers for the domain. And that's why in this case, it is a text record containing SPF information. And lastly, we have D. Our query is the web, file, and print servers are different host names, but all use the same IP address. Well, that means in your DNS server, your DNS server is going to have the same one IP address, that is your A record or your quad A record. Those two records will have the IP address for that server, but how do you now make these able to work in a way where you can simply reference a name or an alias of that particular device? For example, you might have a server, and that one server is your mail server, it's your web server, and maybe it's an FTP server. So perhaps there is an FTP.ProfessorMesser.com, there's a www.ProfessorMesser.com, and there is a, what did I say the other one was? Mail. So mail.ProfessorMesser.com. All three of those are different names of servers, but really, if you looked at our infrastructure, literally the same device. So in that particular case, we need to define a canonical name. That's the term we use to define this alias for those names. So we can say that anything that is a canonical name of mail.professormesser.com really points to this name of this server. It points to server1.professormesser.com. ftp.professormesser.com points to server1.professormesser.com. And our mail, or which one I didn't use yet, www.professormesser.com, also points over to that. So this canonical name makes it very easy. Imagine if you had 20 services on that server, but what if we then change the IP address of that server? The only thing we would have to change in DNS is either the A record or the quad A record, depending on what different IPv6 or IPv4 they are using, or maybe both. But you don't change any of those other 100 records, the CNAME records, because CNAME records are pointing to the name of a server, and then you have an A or quad A record with the IP address of that server, which means if you ever change the IP address of the server, makes it very easy. One single change and all 100 of those services move to the new device. See the value in CNAME? It can save you a lot of time, provide some scalability, especially in relatively complex network designs. Those are the 4 queries we used. Finding an IPv6 of www.professormesser.com is quad A. Incoming email being directed to the spam gateway, we define that in the MX record. Defining an authorized email server is done in a text record. And then the web file and print servers on different host names, but the same IP address, we would be creating an alias as part of a CNAME record. Now, there's other records we did not use here. Pointer records. We did not use name server records. I did not use text records. And ultimately, I did not use the A record as well. But all of these records are things that we need to know. So make sure you look at the DNS record video as part of our course so that you know where these happen to be, where they come from. These could be different kinds of DNS records, and you might be asked for different kinds of queries that are outside the scope of the 4 that we did today. Also, let me tell you, before we leave this performance-based question, that CompTIA has put on their website in a frequently asked questions document relating to performance-based questions that in some scenarios, they could offer you partial credit. So maybe you got 2 of these right. Maybe you got 1 of them right. Maybe you got 3 of them right. And you're wondering, do I get any credit if I do that? I would like to believe you do. But one of the challenges we have when looking at the final score of any of these exams is there's no way to know what you got right. There's no way to know what you got wrong. You don't know how they graded the exam. You're really putting a lot of faith into these organizations when you take these industry certification exams. So that is one of the scenarios where they tell you at some times that they could possibly provide some type of partial credit, but you will never know if you really got it or not. I'm just going with the glass half full, that indeed, this is a perfect example of how partial credit could be given. It's not really a did you get it or did you not get it. There's different levels. There's shades of different colors in here that you could go one way. You could have 2 of them right, 3 of them right. You should get credit for that. And hopefully that will be the way that your exam is graded as well. Well, that was our performance-based question of the month. I think that you did very well on this. I briefly looked through the answers that came through. A lot of you were spot on with the answers that you were providing. You know your DNS records pretty well. So if you aren't recognizing some of these, or you're not really 100% certain about one of these, make a note of it. Make sure you go back and check that out before going to write your exam. That'll be something that may indeed come up on your exam. Certainly a good chance given the number of different records that are there. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice question. Next on this list is this multiple choice question that asks, if I can scroll it on my side, I'm now doing 12 different things on my side. A network technician connects a workstation to a switch port. Despite both devices being powered on, the physical link light remains unlit. Which configuration is the most likely cause of this issue? Is it the Ethernet speed is set to 1 gigabit on one side and 100 megabits on the other? Or is it that the MTU is configured for 9,000 bytes on the switch only? Or is it that LCAP is that's not really what it is. Is it disabled on the workstation interface? That could be the problem. I think we know that particular answer, given my bad spelling on that, is really our issue. Workstation IP address on a different subnet than the switch management interface. Is that causing our problem? Or is it the duplex is set to full on the switch and half on the workstation? So there's the problems that we are running into. There is always a challenge when working on a lot of these devices that you're going to see different circumstances occur when you're troubleshooting. This is certainly a very specific one of those where the network technician is connecting a workstation to a switch port. Despite both devices being powered on, the physical link light remains unlit. Which configuration is the most likely cause of this issue? I don't think I can change it on the fly, or I'd change some of my configurations around on these devices. At least you have 4 good answers to go with. I think we can disable or say the one in the middle, probably not what we're going to work with. Yes, it's a typo. As I've mentioned 10 times already, it's a typo. So you will figure it out. And in fact, maybe that's what we go with. No, I meant to do it because it's something that doesn't exist and you should recognize it doesn't. It's a typo. Let's just go with it. Let's call it what it is, people. I am indeed human. As I'm now bucking the trend. If you're listening to the rumors, they are not true. I am indeed human when it works that way. But a lot of you already answered this question, so you already knew that you had a pretty good idea what the answer is with this one. I've not peeked at the answers, so I'm not sure what you answered on this one. Make sure you get those in by following the links on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer that one. I know you would think that I'm now acting like as if I'm not a real person. Although if you go back before the world of AI, you will find that I am just as incompetent when it comes to spelling as anyone else. So I think that's, if nothing, it proves a little more humanity as you stick some of these things in. Let's see. Speaking of humanity and me wanting to finish this question, let's see how you did with it. A network technician connects a workstation to a switch port. Despite both devices being powered on, the physical link light remains unlit. Which configuration is the most likely cause of this issue? Ethernet speed is set to 1 gigabit on one side and 100 megabits on the other. MTU is configured for 9,000 bytes on the switch only. LCAP is disabled on the workstation interface. I'm sure it is. Workstation IP address is on a different subnet than the switch management interface. Or is duplex set to full on the switch and half on the workstation? Let's close our poll and see how you did with this one. This is remarkable, if only in the fact that my misspellings tend to get a lot of answers. 41% of it say the duplex is set to full on the switch and half on the workstation. Not a majority of you, but the plurality of you chose that particular answer. Coming up as a close second, 34% said the workstation IP address is on a different subnet than the switch management interface. 12% of you said the Ethernet speed is set to 1 gigabit on one side and 100 megabits on the other. 10% of you said LCAP is disabled on the workstation interface. I think we all know now that that's not the right answer because there's not a thing. Maybe there is something called LCAP, but it's not something that's related to switch or workstation interfaces, so not the answer we were looking for. And MTU is configured for 9,000 bytes on the switch. Only 2% of you chose that particular answer. Well, we got 2 good ones to choose from. 41% say it's the duplex. 34% of you say it's the IP addressing on a different subnet than the switch management interface. Let's close the poll and see how we did. Hold on a second. The answer was the one that 12% of you chose, which was the Ethernet speed is set to 1 gigabit on one side and 100 megabits on the other. Well, why would that be the case? Why is it not a workstation IP address problem? Why is it not a duplex issue? Well, let's talk about duplex and speeds really quick, because this is something you will undoubtedly run into in your troubleshooting processes. I can't tell you how many times I'm plugging in an evaluation firewall into a data center, into a test lab, somewhere. We plug it in, no link light. And so you have to know what do you look at first? And in the case of configuring individual interfaces, one of the best places to start would just be the basic configuration of the interface itself. How is the interface configured? Before we look at IP addresses, before we look at applications, before we see if the firewall's filtering something, before we see if there's a something else on the network, a routing table problem, let's just look at the interfaces. How are they configured? Most interfaces allow you to set different speed values within the interface itself. 10 gig, 100, 1,000, 10 gig, 2.5 gig, 20 gig. You've got different options these days for different speeds of these Ethernet interfaces. You also have an option on whether you can set an interface to half duplex or full duplex, depending on which topology you're working with. There are some topologies these days that don't have half duplex any longer. Everything is full duplex, whereas other types of Ethernet standards support both half and full duplex. Now, most of the time, these are set as something that is automatic. We configure the interface to auto-configure itself to what we call in the world of Ethernet auto-negotiation. It figures out once it's connected, both sides talk to each other in a certain way and say, what can you support? Well, I can do this. Well, I can do this. So now we're running at our highest speed and our best possible duplex. So you'll find in a lot of organizations just set automatically, and you turn them on, and most of the time, that auto-negotiation process works perfectly and everything runs normally. It doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes there are incompatibilities between different manufacturers' equipment. Sometimes there are incompatibilities within the Ethernet chipsets that are used in this separate equipment. Sometimes Ethernet chipset incompatibilities within the same equipment. I've seen crazy stuff, and you will too. So sometimes setting it for automatic is not the best option. Sometimes you want to manually set it to be the best option. But if you want to have the best possible throughput, or indeed to have any throughput at all, it needs to match on both sides of that. Once you've configured that both sides are the same, then you can continue the process of looking at IP addresses, what VLAN is it connected to, and other details specific to layers 3 and above, if you want to think of it that way. One of the challenges you'll see, though, is that if you do set an interface to be a manual configuration, well, then it's up to you to make sure that both sides match. And if you don't match both sides, you will see different symptoms occur depending on what the mismatch happens to be. For example, if you set one side to half duplex and you manually set the other side to full duplex, when they connect to each other, they will start sending information when they are not supposed to be sending information, especially the full duplex side. So you probably will see performance that will degrade rapidly once information starts going over that link. But the link is still up and running. And one of the things we would very commonly do is when we would first plug in a firewall to the network, we would immediately perform a speed test. We would have performed the speed test prior to putting it in. We put in the equipment, and then we run the speed test again. So if you have a 100 megabit network link to the internet and you run your speed test, you'll probably be close to that 100 megabit. When you put the firewall in place, it should still be 100 megabit. But if you ran your speed test and you got 50 megabits per second, something is wrong. And I would bet your problem is going to be duplex. But at least you're up and running. You have a link light, data is passing. The performance, however, is not what you would expect. When you would have other mismatches, especially with speed, the problem becomes much more obvious, because if you set one side to 100 megabits in its manual configuration, and then you manually configure the other side to 1 gigabit, those two sides won't talk to each other. One's running 10 times slower than the other. They cannot communicate with each other. In fact, they use different methods to communicate. There's different signaling being used on 100 megabit than on 1000 megabit, then on 10 gigabit. So effectively different languages trying to communicate with each other, if you think of it that way. So if you have speed set with a mismatch, it will not connect at all. And if you look at a question we had here, we had a network technician connecting a workstation to a switch port. Despite both devices being powered on, the physical link light remains unlit. And in the list of things that I have here, there's only one of these answers that would have that particular symptom related to the problem, and it is that the Ethernet speed is set to 1 gigabit per second on one side and 100 megabit per second on the other. That will cause zero link light. You will not get any link connection across that particular network. You will not be able to pass any data. It simply won't work. And that's one of the reasons we often will do automatic, so that we can at least avoid that particular issue should it occur. But what about these other answers you chose? Why would they not have a physical link light not lighting up? Well, as I already mentioned, duplex being set to full on the switch and half on the workstation creates performance problems, but it still passes data. You will still get a link light. You will still be able to have everything working. Duplex, although not as efficient as it should be, a duplex mismatch will create and allow at least traffic to pass, and you will get a link light. 34% of you said the workstation IP address is on a different subnet than the switch management interface. Being at layer 3, working with IP addresses, subnet masks, default gateways, DNS IP addresses, those are all important addressing configurations, but have nothing to do with the actual Ethernet link under the surface. And if you think about it, you could have IP addresses and no physical Ethernet links. You could be on a wireless network. So think of it that way. Think of the interface and the hardware connection as being one type of connection, and then the IP addresses is more of a logical addressing that we're going to use to have devices talk to each other once the road is built. So that's why workstation IP addresses not being correct or being on a different VLAN or not matching someone else's VLAN has nothing to do with the link light problem we are seeing. So if you don't have a link light and you go and you start changing IP addresses, you're not going to do anything. It's not going to help you. So it's certainly the problem that we're going through. Next, we have LCAP is disabled on the workstation interface. There were a number of different directions you could have gone here. It could have been LDAP was what I was talking about. That doesn't make sense on a workstation interface. More likely, I was thinking of link aggregation or some other type of configuration there when I mistyped whatever it was I was thinking at the time. This obviously would not be the answer because LCAP is not a thing. It doesn't exist. And having a protocol enabled or disabled on an interface doesn't change its physical capabilities of being connected anyway. So even if LCAP was a thing, it would not cause something to be disabled on a workstation interface. And lastly, MTU is configured for 9,000 bytes on the switch only. I've done this myself. I've configured jumbo frames on a switch, but not configured jumbo frames on the workstation. And it works fine. Now, doing it the other direction usually doesn't work very well because we'll be sending jumbo frames to a switch and the switch won't know what to do with them. But a switch being able to allow 9,000 byte frames doesn't, and a mismatch there, and somebody not using 9,000 byte frames doesn't cause the link to not physically connect to each other. There might be a problem communicating over that link if there is a mismatch of the MTU. And we talked a little bit about that in a previous Network Plus version, but MTU mismatches I don't think are included in the current Network Plus version. Maybe that's good for all of us. One less thing to remember at the moment, and it is a relatively rare thing to run into. But it doesn't cause the link light to go away or not appear at all. In this case, the only one of these that would cause a physical link light to be unlit is that Ethernet speed set to 1 gigabit on one side and 100 megabits on the other. Well, I'm talking a lot about these technologies. We've talked a lot through a number of these, so I want to keep moving through. For those of you wondering, the maximum transmission unit, the MTU, is what that is referring to. Very commonly configured when you're setting things up for jumbo frames on a switch. And if you want more information on that, have a look at MTUs, have a look at jumbo frames, have a look at transferring network and configuration for switches. That's where you would find information on those. And if you want to see more about network configurations, they are in our N10-009 course, section 2.2 under interface configurations. Let's keep going. Let's try to get two or three more in before we're done here today. Our next question is this one that asks, a management station is configured to monitor a router for spikes in hardware temperature. Which of the following would provide an alert to the management station the moment a temperature threshold is reached? Would it be a MIB walk, a layer 2 broadcast, an SNMP trap, an LDAP lookup, or a PowerShell alert? One of those is going to be our best answer. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. That question again asks, a management station is configured to monitor a router for spikes in hardware temperature. Which of the following would provide an alert to the management station the moment a temperature threshold is reached? Is it MIB walk, layer 2 broadcast, SNMP trap, LDAP lookup, or PowerShell alert? Get your answers in. They're coming in quick. Get those answers in, what you think the answer might be. Choose from one of those 5, and we'll see how well you happen to know this particular answer. This might be pretty good to work through. Maybe this is also something you're familiar with. So if you've ever run into this problem or worked through this problem, you know that might be something that you can configure on your own switches and routers to monitor for spikes in hardware temperature. Might be something you can use to be able to do that. If you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no answers in the chat room. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asked, a management station is configured to monitor a router for spikes in hardware temperature. It's a very interesting statistic that we are measuring there, an interesting metric. Which of the following would provide an alert to the management station the moment a temperature threshold is reached? Would it be MIB walk, layer 2 broadcast, SNMP trap, LDAP lookup, or PowerShell alert? Let's close our poll and see how we did. 62% of you say the answer, it's a trap, an SNMP trap specifically. We also have 15% that say PowerShell alert, 10% say, or 11% said a layer 2 broadcast, 10% said a MIB walk, and only 3% of you said an LDAP lookup, which, by the way, I spelled properly. You're welcome. Well, 62% is a pretty good number, but did we run into the same trap that we did with the last question? Well, let's find out what the actual answer is. It's the one that 62% of you chose. We bounced back perfectly. SNMP trap is what we were looking for. That is the answer to this particular question. But what is it? What's a trap? What are you talking about? This term's an odd one to use in the world of networking. Admittedly, it is an odd term. And SNMP, of course, is the Simple Network Management Protocol. It's a very common protocol that is used to monitor systems on the network. Us as end users never see SNMP, but the network team, the security team, and a lot of other organizations in IT are using SNMP to query servers to find out, is the server available? How's the memory utilization in that server? How's the disk utilization on the different volumes of that server? How's the temperature inside of that device? SNMP can monitor for thousands and thousands and thousands of individual metrics on a single interface. Well, that gives you a lot of information you can pull from these. And as you can imagine, it really helps quite a bit when you have a data center in one city, a data center in another city, there's a third data center across the world, and you need to monitor all of those to know how the performance and the availability of those systems happens to be at any particular time. Well, having that process in place requires us to query those devices. And so your management workstation every few minutes will probably go out and query that device to be able to see if it's available, see how the temperature is inside of it, see how much drive space is available, and it can track that information over time. But what if you wanted something more proactive? What if you didn't have to wait to query the device to find out how it's performing? Well, you can configure SNMP to effectively work in reverse so that it monitors the system itself internally to that device. And if we ever exceed a particular value, it proactively sends an alert back to the management station. We refer to that as an SNMP trap. We have configured that device previously to monitor for temperature. And if the temperature ever goes above 100 degrees, then send us a message. That way we don't have to keep polling it. We've already told it one time what we're looking for. If it ever runs into that, it will tell us and provide us with information. And it sends it as a specific SNMP protocol across the network. So it is a unicast from the device that we are monitoring directly back to your management station over TCP/IP, specifically using UDP port 162. It makes it very easy. For example, maybe we're looking for excessive number of CRC errors. So we'll tell our system, keep monitoring CRC errors. If we suddenly see a big jump in CRC errors, send a trap back to the monitoring station. We will immediately get a message. It then goes off on our phones. We get a text message. We get alerts that are going. A siren goes off. There are lights that flash. We can do anything we want at that point to be able to respond to that particular issue. The traps were configured prior to us receiving the trap. So we have to think about, what do we want to monitor for? We configure it on that switch, that router, that server, and then we just have to sit back and wait for any alerts to come in. Those alerts, I don't know why we didn't call them S&MP alerts, but we didn't. So we just have to remember they're S&MP traps. That's what we were looking for. And indeed, that's what 62% of you chose, was S&MP trap. You got it absolutely correct. That's what we wanted. 15% of you said a PowerShell alert. And although PowerShell could do a number of different things, in this particular case, we're monitoring a router. There's not a lot of Windows-based routers out there. I guess technically Windows itself can route, but we generally do not use Windows as a router. We probably should not use Windows as a router. Maybe some of you are doing that. If that's the case, maybe you could somehow create a PowerShell alert to maybe do something like that. But in most cases, the thing that really is almost universal wherever you go is going to be S&MP. So saying an S&MP trap is going to be an infinitely more interesting and available solution to this problem than something like a PowerShell alert in this particular case. Now, if it was Windows that we were talking about, and we were monitoring a Windows service, and we're waiting for that Windows service to do something, well, then maybe PowerShell might have been one of those answers, although Windows also supports S&MP. So it might also be S&MP in that case as well. Now we're just sort of creating new questions. That was not the question in this case. Definitely S&MP trap. 11% of you said a layer 2 broadcast. And although technically a layer 2 broadcast could potentially send you that information, a layer 2 broadcast is only going to work on a single layer 2 broadcast domain, which are generally speaking relatively small, especially when we gave you the scenario of a data center in one city, a data center in another city, and another data center in another country. Well, in that case, all three of those are certainly going to be on different layer 2 networks. So if they send a layer 2 broadcast in another country, you're never going to see it where you happen to be. Broadcasts also generally not a great way to communicate. So that's one of the reasons you don't see broadcasts as any part of IPv6, because we've already decided with IPv4, we've had it with broadcasts. We are over using broadcasts. We don't want to use broadcasts anymore. They are inefficient. They take up bandwidth. They're wasting all of our time. So therefore, not using broadcasts would be preferable. 10% of you said a MIBWalk. MIBWalks, the Management Information Base, is effectively the database that's used for S&MP to define what all of the different metrics are that it can monitor. And each system will have a different MIB. There's a MIB for Windows. There's a MIB for Cisco routers. There's a MIB for Palo Alto Networks firewalls. There's a different MIB for other manufacturers' firewalls. Every manufacturer has their own MIB and their own statistics that they can provide to you through the use of S&MP. And one way to view that MIB is to query every possible number associated with that database. We refer to that as a MIB walk. I do a demonstration of a MIB walk in our video. It's in section 3.2 called SNMP, and gives you an idea of what you receive when you start to do one of those MIB walks. And lastly, an SNMP lookup, or an LDAP lookup. LDAP is also a database type. LDAP is a great way to be able to work through those. So an LDAP lookup is commonly used to query information associated with a user database or as a database of devices. For example, a Microsoft Active Directory database can be queried using LDAP, which allows third-party devices that may not even be Windows-based to be able to view and retrieve and, in some cases, change the information that's inside of an Active Directory database using this common protocol known as LDAP, the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. And although this is extremely useful for gathering those details, has nothing to do with all of the questions we have about monitoring for spikes in hardware temperature and receiving proactive messages. SNMP trap is the answer that we were looking for, and 62% of you got that one absolutely right. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that credit is you would follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and in that link, those links on my site, you'll see a link for Contact Us. This will bring up a form. Put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put May 2026 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, S&P Trap, MIB Walk. Those are your super secret code words of the month. Not so super secret now, but you get the idea. Send those to me. It takes me about a week or so to turn those around, but I will certainly be able to provide you with an email back that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Those instructions again, and you must follow the instructions or you don't get the CEU. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us. Put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put May 2026 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, S&P Trap, MIB Walk. Four different words. Not one word, 4 words there. So that would be a good one to be able to work through that. Make sure you are familiar with that process. If you do not follow that process, you don't get the CEU. Going through that process is part of you attending and listening and knowing what I just said so that I can certify that indeed you must have been here watching this live event. That is the CEU that you will provide to CompTIA if you're interested in renewing your certification based on CEUs. There are certainly other ways to renew your certification, thankfully. So that is something to think about. If you answered S&P Trap for this one, 62% of you got that answer absolutely correct. Well done. There's a lot of information, as you can see, in Network Plus, and indeed, the number of videos we have for Network Plus are many and varied. 87 videos that we have just for Network Plus. That single course, because our course covers every single topic that's listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives. It is a remarkably comprehensive course. I would argue we have the most comprehensive course of any other courses you will find for Network Plus, for A+, or for Security Plus, because we follow those objectives to the letter. This also means there's a lot of content there. Over 12 hours of content covering everything from network security and subnetting and the OSI model and understanding more about topologies and proxies and VPNs and S&P traps and so many other things. And of course, I'd love you to read through all of those, all 87 videos, watch out all of those 87 videos, but not everyone has that functionality. Not everyone has the capability to do something like that. So what I wanted to provide you is a way to take all of that information from my videos and put them into one single document. This, of course, does not replace any of the information associated with these videos, but it does help you remember the things that you went through in the video course. Not only is there a table of contents for all of these, but all of our course notes include all of the text, all of the important graphics, all of the important tables, and they are in the same format, structure, and style as the videos, so they make a great companion as you are reading and watching at the same time. And you can follow along in the notes as I am going through the videos themselves. You can see they are in full color. This is the PDF version, but of course we have a physical book version of this as well. And let me see if I can find the page that we're looking at here. It's exactly the same in the book version as it is the PDF, which is exactly what you want and something like that. And if you purchase the physical edition, that's our printed book version, you get the digital edition PDF for free, no additional cost there. So while you're waiting for us to ship this, because we print and ship them to you on demand, while you're waiting on that, you'll still be able to download and use the digital edition as you are studying for this while you're waiting on that delivery to occur. Those are my course notes. And if something that you might want or something you think you can use for your studies, it's kind of a win-win. It also helps support us create more videos and have events like this. You can find out more about our course notes by visiting our website at professormesser.com. Either select from the main menu for our Network Plus course notes or use professormesser.com/NPCN. Now, I know we're at the top of the hour, but I've been talking so much that I think it might be a good idea if we do a couple more questions anyway, wouldn't it? We can run through a few more. So let's do another one. Let's do this question. And this one asks, an administrator is reviewing a packet capture, good for them, and notices a MAC address starting with 001 Fox 5 Bravo. What does this 3-byte prefix represent? Is that a burned-in serial number, an organizationally unique identifier, logical link control, operational status, or a cyclic redundancy check? There's a few things to choose from there. Let's see if we know something about MAC addresses. The question again asks, an administrator is reviewing a packet capture and notices a MAC address starting with 001 Fox 5 Bravo. What does this 3-byte prefix represent? Is it a burned-in serial number, an organizationally unique identifier, a logical link control, an operational status, or a cyclic redundancy check? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat. Instead, you want to go to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you know this one. A lot of answers coming in quick on this one. I always look at the numbers incrementing in the upper right. And if they go very fast, I think we have all gotten it right. Or sometimes we all get it wrong. That sometimes happens too. But usually when it goes pretty quick, I feel like we've got a beat on this one. We are familiar with the topic. We can punch that in and get it going pretty quick. So a lot of you got your answers in so quick, which means you didn't Google. No Googling. Stop Googling. Don't do it. We can pretend that we are in the exam room. There's no Google in the exam room. There's no misguided AI to lead you astray in the exam room. So maybe it's a win-win if you think of it that way. So let's see how you did with this one. The question again asked, an administrator is reviewing a packet capture and notices a MAC address starting with 001 Fox 5 Bravo. What does this 3-byte prefix represent? Does it represent a burned-in serial number, an organizationally unique identifier, a logical link control, an operational status, or a cyclic redundancy check? Well, let's close our poll and see how we did. And 76% of you, again, a strong number, say the answer is organizationally unique identifier, or an OUI. 16% said a burned-in serial number. You also have, sometimes you'll see this referred to as a burned-in address, or a BIA. 4% of you said logical link control. And then a tie for last place with 1% for operational status and cyclic redundancy check. Those are the answers we received. 76% of you said an OUI, and indeed, that is the number that we were looking for, which is those first 3 bytes of a MAC address. This is something that's useful to know because you'll do a packet capture and you'll see all of these different MAC addresses and tons of MAC addresses. The first 3 bytes are the same, and then the last 3 bytes are completely different. And that's because the MAC address is split into these 2 pieces. The MAC address has one piece of this that is the OUI, the organizationally unique identifier. This is a 3 bytes that have been assigned to a manufacturer. So when you receive a computer and a chipset and an Ethernet adapter inside of that device, that Ethernet adapter is made by someone, and that Ethernet manufacturer has been assigned 3 of these bytes that are unique to that manufacturer. Nobody else is using those addresses. They are indeed burned in to the MAC address of that adapter card or adapter chipset, and they will be the same for that manufacturer. If it's a very large manufacturer, you will find that they will have multiple OUIs, and there are databases on the internet that list out all of the OUIs for each of the manufacturers. In fact, if you wanted to type in the first 3 bytes of your MAC address into one of those, you would see who manufactured your Ethernet card. One great list of OUIs is over on the Wireshark website. So go to Wireshark and you'll be able to have a look at what those different OUIs are, and you can search for them as well, or just list them all out. You can see all of the different Ethernet manufacturers that are there. The last 3 bytes are really an incremental set of bytes that are burned in by the manufacturer. You can think of these as a serial number for that card because they are ideally would be different than any other Ethernet card. Your MAC address should be a unique value universally. There should not be another Ethernet card in the world that has the same MAC address as your Ethernet card. Now, that is the way it's supposed to work in practical terms. That is the standard. That's what we would expect from an Ethernet adapter. But I have seen times where a manufacturer messed up during the manufacturing process and multiple adapter cards were introduced that had the same MAC address. And in this particular example, that normally wouldn't be a problem if those went to different places. But in this example, in this circumstance, all of those adapter cards got put onto the same physical network. So when one device was turned on, it worked great. And then when you turned on the second device, nothing worked properly because they had the same MAC address, which should never occur. In fact, our operating systems don't even look for something like that on the network, and simply messes up your switch. Your switch now, wait a second, I thought the MAC address was here. Now it's here. No, wait, now it's over here again. No, now it's over here again. I'll just keep changing where I send data, and hopefully maybe some of it will get through, maybe none of it will get through. We'll just keep going back and forth to be able to do that. And that's why you want to be sure that you don't have a duplicate MAC address on your network. Your switch will hate you for it. And ultimately, you'll have a problem communicating to all of the devices with the shared address. Now, of course, keep that in mind because you could administratively change the MAC address of a device as well. So make sure that you don't run into that scenario, because that would also create effectively the same problem as a manufacturer having a duplicate. Don't make, if you are administratively assigning MAC addresses, which in itself is rare and unusual and probably not a best practice, but you could potentially accidentally create a duplicate MAC address on your network. So something to try for later. If you have a sample network set up, if you got a virtual network set up with VMs, change one device's MAC address, administratively configure one MAC address to be one value, and administratively configure a different machine to be the same value of MAC address, and then watch what happens. Comedy. You'll have such hilarity will ensue if you do that. In this case, though, the answer we were looking for was the OUI, the organizationally unique identifier. Burned in serial number. Technically, there's not a burned in serial number on an Ethernet adapter, but if you wanted to name something as a burned in serial number, the last 3 bytes, you could say, well, that's sort of our serial number, because that is the thing that is unique for that particular device. But that's not what we were asking for. We were asking for the prefix, not the suffix. So in this case, it would not be the burned in serial number. Logical link control describes that layer of the OSI model that we're working with. You often hear a MAC address, a MAC and an LLC even describe the same. Well, what's the MAC address? Well, what's the LLC address? They're really asking for the same thing. We rarely use that term, though, in normal parlance. Usually we're just asking for the MAC address, whether technically it is a MAC address or not. For example, on some wide area network connections, we don't have MAC addresses. So that's one of those examples where, okay, what's the MAC? Well, I'll give you this information. Or operational status. Is the link up? Is the link down? Is the link working? Is it not working? That is certainly the case for understanding uptime and availability, but it has nothing to do with MAC addresses or a particular value of the MAC addresses. Operational status is not communicated across the network using MAC addresses. And a cyclic redundancy check is part of the Ethernet frame. It is not part, we call that a frame check sequence in some cases. You can see it at the end of the Ethernet frame over here, frame check sequence. That is a cyclic redundancy check in many cases. But that has nothing to do with the MAC address. As you can see, the MAC addresses are earlier on in the frame. There's the destination MAC and the source MAC right there. Comes right after the preamble and the start frame delimiter on your Ethernet frames. Frame check sequence down at the end. It's a completely different thing. Has nothing to do with the MAC address, so it would not be the cyclic redundancy check. So 1% of you, only 1% of you chose that one. However, the answer, the one we were looking for, was indeed the organizationally unique identifier. You know, I know we're way over time on this one, but I just did not get enough questions this month. So let's do another one. You don't mind, do you? Let's get one more question in. I think we should. Next on our list, we're going to do some troubleshooting. This user is reporting that their audio calls frequently stutter and can be difficult to understand. Which metric should the network administrator measure to evaluate the consistency of packet arrival intervals? Would it be duplex, bandwidth, decibels, jitter, or interference? A user reports that audio calls frequently stutter and can be difficult to understand. Which metric should the network administrator measure to evaluate the consistency of packet arrival intervals? Would it be duplex, bandwidth, decibels, jitter, or interference? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by going to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. So folks in the chat, we're talking about that previous question with MAC addresses, and indeed MAC addresses are burned into the ROM of an adapter card, but you can change that in the software of your operating system. You can go into Windows, into the most Ethernet adapters will support this. You can go into the properties of an Ethernet adapter into the hardware setting and change the MAC address to whatever you'd like. So even though there's one burned in, you can change it. You can make it whatever you'd like. That's what that's about. So that's just one. You rarely do that. As I mentioned, that's not a best practice. It's not something you want to do. But maybe you will come in your career, you'll come across one of those scenarios where a manufacturer has created two cards with the same address. So a quick fix would be to administratively assign the address. Don't worry about the one that's burned in. Use the one I gave you, and now everything will start to work. And that's ultimately how we solved the other problem. In that particular case, the devices that had duplicate MACs, as I recall, were security devices like X-ray machines, or it may have been a bomb sniffing device. I forget what it was, but it was one of these big machines. Was being set up for, at the time, the Atlanta Olympics. And that was one of the stories that came back after the Atlanta Olympics, because a lot of people, the network people, were volunteers there. You always get great stories in those types of scenarios. Just one of those things you'll sometimes have a chance to do is to be able to apply your network knowledge into times and places that normally you might not have expected to be able to use that knowledge. And that was one that the manufacturer of the security equipment, really good at creating X-ray machines, but maybe not great at creating network configurations. And turns out that was the case. So that had to be a one fix. Think of all these people trying to get in through security, and now your X-ray machines aren't working. We're just doing an Olympics. What are we going to be able to do now? Well, they put a network analysis tool. They put a sniffer on the link. They were able to see that pretty easily. Speaking of pretty easily, let's see how you did with this one. I'm already giving you the benefit of a doubt here. Let's look at the question again and see what you answered. The question asks, a user reports their audio calls frequently stutter and can be difficult to understand. Which metric should the network administrator measure to evaluate the consistency of packet arrival intervals? Would that be duplex, bandwidth, decibels, jitter, or interference? What did you choose? Oh, here we go. And there's the answer. 72% of you say the answer is jitter. 20% say it's bandwidth. Oh, you got a problem? Throw bandwidth at it. That's what solves it. 4% said decibels, 3% said interference, and 1% said duplex. 72% is a big number, and that's a weird name. Is it really jitter? Yes, it is. That's exactly what we're doing. There are certain times when evaluating the jitter information is incredibly important. And usually those times are when it's an application that is very sensitive to any type of delay. There's not a lot of applications like this, but the ones that do have a sensitivity to delay are usually very, very important applications. Otherwise, why would it matter if the answer came in 1 millisecond versus 10 milliseconds? Does that really make a difference? Well, in most cases, it doesn't. But what if it's a voice communication? What if it's stock trading information? A very competitive market where the stock traders, the faster they get the trade request, the faster they can provide and fulfill that trade request. And when you fulfill the trade request, you get a commission. So if you're faster than everyone else, you will make more money than everyone else. That's the competition with stock trading anyway. And these days it's so automated, having that level of sensitivity and knowing that it needs to be as fast as possible becomes very, very, very important. Same thing for voice communication, same thing for live video. Anything that is in the moment certainly has a sensitivity to response times and being able to get the data coming in at regular intervals. You don't want to have it bursty where some traffic comes in really quick and there's a long delay and then more traffic comes in really quick. That doesn't help very well when you're on a phone call or you're looking at live video. Another problem with that, of course, is that when you're on a phone call and the packet goes through and the packet gets lost, well, there's no way to resend the packet and sort of make up for that. The time has already passed. This is a live event. This is a live communication. So you can't help with that. Running TCP or running UDP means nothing at that point. You lost the packet. It's gone. You can't resend. You just keep going. And that's why you'll notice our phone calls don't rewind and then send you the information through in a better way. It just dismisses the packet. You get some noise. People sound like they're underwater. And you just keep going with the conversation. Oh, I didn't get that. Could you repeat it? What you get very often. The way that you qualify this, the way that you quantify this, rather, the way that you determine how consistently are these packets coming through? Are we getting all of these packets in a standard amount of time? That would be extremely useful if you're having issues with choppy phone calls or it doesn't sound right. Maybe this is a problem. There's a delay between packets. That might be an issue. So we want to look at jitter. So if you were to evaluate this and look at it in a protocol decode, one very good type of consistency would look something like this, where the packets are coming in a relatively standard amount of time. Some of the packets are coming in, it's a little bit longer between them. Some are a little bit shorter between them. But effectively, we're getting them in at a standard rate that is keeping up with the live video. It's keeping up with the phone call. It's keeping up with the web session that we're in. Everything is working as expected. And the jitter values here will be relatively small because they're coming in with relatively small gaps in between all of these. When you run into problems, you'll probably see the decode look a little something like this, where you'll get 3 packets come in and then a long delay. There's a long jitter. And then 3 more packets, and then another long delay, and it continues. So if you see that happening, then we are not getting data coming in at a standard amount of time. We're getting these gaps of time, and that gap of time is just long enough to disrupt this live communication that we're hoping to keep constantly going through the network. So this would be a great time to capture some packets, look at jitter information. If the jitter numbers are very small, we're probably fine with our inter-packet delays. But if these jitter values are large, this might be the case that we have. We might actually want to look at the real delta time numbers within our packet capture to see just how much delay is occurring between these. And then you can start doing more troubleshooting. Where's this delay coming from? Is it delayed when it's left the user? Is it delayed when it hits our wide area network? Is it delayed when it's on our internal network? There's a lot more work to do at that point. But if you're able to look at the packet capture and you don't see any jitter problems, you can immediately say, well, it's not a delay issue. It's not a some of the data coming in fast and some of the data coming in slow. It is very consistent in how we are receiving data. Therefore, our problem here is not an inter-packet delay problem or any type of congestion. We're receiving data just fine. The problem's got to be somewhere else, something we might want to work through. So that is indeed the answer we were looking for. Being able to measure and evaluate the consistency of packet arrival intervals is measured through a quantitative value known as jitter to be able to work through it. Now, what about these other answers? 20% of you chose bandwidth. Bandwidth is a way that we can measure how much possible traffic we can put on a network, but it doesn't describe the consistency of receiving packets over that. In fact, bandwidth, it's kind of a fake number if you think about it. What is the bandwidth usage of a particular link? If you were to look at your Ethernet network right now, what is the bandwidth percentage? How much of that bandwidth is being used? If you have a 10 gig network, maybe you're using 50% of the bandwidth. Maybe you're using 60% of the bandwidth. But in reality, that's not how Ethernet works at all. Ethernet, you're either using the network or you are not using the network. So if you wanted to be a purist, bandwidth is either 100% or 0%. Well, it's not very helpful when you're trying to troubleshoot a network or explain to someone the type of bandwidth that we have. So when you start using that bandwidth, you can measure the throughput of traffic through that. If you're looking at it and wondering how much of that bandwidth are we using, we usually look at that over a time frame. We are usually looking at it in 1 second intervals or 10-second intervals or 1 minute intervals or 5-minute intervals, and you're getting a value of how much of that you are using at any particular time. So bandwidth is not the number we were looking for. Bandwidth gives us kind of a broader view of usage over a longer time period, not a packet by packet by packet time period. Duplex, or 4% said decibels. Decibels is relating to a signal strength on that particular network. And signal strength is useful, but it does not allow us to measure or view the consistency of these things. In fact, in this case, decibels would not apply here unless we were measuring how loud our phone was. That might be a time we would use decibels. Certainly, we use decibels as a measurement of signal strength, commonly on fiber, but you can also measure decibels on a copper network as well. Not very useful to measure it that way on a copper network, but certainly something to think about. We have 3% of that said interference is what we would measure. Well, in this particular case, we don't know if there's interference. We don't know if there's congestion. We don't know why we are getting stutter. We don't know why it's difficult to understand this phone call. All we know is that we are not receiving it. Could it have been interference? It could have been, but also could not have been. So interference would not be the answer we were looking at here. Ultimately, we may find there was interference, but we don't know that to be the case at this point. And lastly, duplex. We mentioned earlier about duplex mismatches and how you want the duplex full or half to be the same on both sides. But that would not tell us anything about the consistency of packet arrival intervals, and that was the number that we were looking for. So in this case, the 72% of you that said jitter got that one absolutely correct. That is what we were looking for, and that is the correct answer. Given all of the other answers, that's the only thing it could have possibly been, is that jitter value. I mentioned throughout this entire live stream that everything that we are talking about here, that everything that's in my course, everything that we are doing, is something that comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Those CompTIA exam objectives are valuable. They tell you everything you need to know about this exam because CompTIA sticks to these exam objectives like glue. They stick to them. Everything you're going to get on your exam is listed in this document. You can get this document from the CompTIA website for free. Free. Costs you nothing. I think you have to give up your email address. That's all you do there. The objectives then are provided. In fact, I have a copy of the objectives right here. Here are the Network Plus exam objectives. They tell you about the exam itself. They give you a breakdown of the different sections. CompTIA calls them domains that are here: networking concepts, network implementation, network operations, network security, and network troubleshooting. And it shows you the percentage of how they will be represented on the actual exam. And then perhaps more importantly, we're going to look at Section 1, Domain 1, Networking Controls. The first section is 1.1, and it asks to explain concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection, or OSI, reference model. And they list out Layer 1 physical, Layer 2 data link, Layer 3 network, Layer 4 transport, Layer 5 session, Layer 6 presentation, and Layer 7 application. So they want you to understand what those are and how they work. Then Section 1.2, compare and contrast networking appliances, applications, and functions. Well, what kind of networking applications, appliances, and functions? I'm glad you asked. Physical and virtual appliances such as routers, switch, firewalls, IDS, IPS, load balancer, proxy, NAS, SAN, wireless access points, wireless controllers, content delivery networks, virtual private networks, quality of service, and time to live. Whew, that's a lot just in one single section. So you should be able to look at any one of those bullets. Look at IDS, IPS, and you should be able to tell yourself or someone else what that is, how it's different than some of the other things on this particular list, and what you would use it for. What are its functions? Where would you put this? What does it do, and why are you using it, and where would you put it? That's really the core of what we're trying to find out here. And that's only Section 1.2. You've also got Section 1.3. You got Section 1.4 with all the port numbers. You got Section 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8, and we're only through the first domain. Next page, Domain 2, Network Implementation. Next page, Domain 3, Network Operations. Next page is Network Security and Network Troubleshooting. So there's a lot of bullets on here. There's a lot of objectives on this exam. This lists every single one of them. So if you're reading through something online and you don't recognize the topic, you're studying from a Network Plus book and they're talking about something you haven't seen before, go back to the objectives. If it's not in the objectives, you don't need to know it for the exam. If it is in the objectives, you absolutely could be asked about it on your exam. So make sure you go through every single one of those, all that list of those bullets, to really understand what could possibly be asked of you. People often say, I'm getting ready to take my exam. What do I need to do? It's a week away. Go through this list. This is your checklist. This will tell you if you really are ready for the exam or not. I was doing some of that earlier. I was going through a scenario where we were looking at the first section. Maybe you know physical layer 1 really well. We'll mark it in green. Maybe layer 2, you sort of know, but maybe you could do better on it. We'll mark it yellow. And layer 3, the network layer. Oh, I don't remember anything about the network layer. Let me mark it as red. I'll come back to that. And go through this entire document and mark every single bullet with a color. And then when you're done, all the red stuff are the things you need to study first. All the yellows are the things you need to study second. You obviously don't need to study the greens. Pardon me. That would be a great way. A great way to study, a great way to keep track, a great way to understand where your shortcomings might be, where things you might want to study a little bit more. And that will really help you if you're planning to take this exam. We do one of these study groups every month for Network Plus. The one today was obviously here on May the 13th. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a Security Plus study group in May that is already scheduled for May 27th. We are still on track for that one. So come on back in a couple of weeks. We'll do the same thing, but we'll do it for Network Plus topics. Absolutely. There's also quite a bit that we do in June. I've already scheduled the dates for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. We've got on June the 2nd and June the 4th are our Core 1 and Core 2 study groups for A+. On the 18th is our Network Plus study group, and on the 24th is the Security Plus study group for June. But obviously, we have another one for our current May in 2 weeks from now. So we're already planning way out, so you know when the next events might be. Well, I think if you want to, by the way, these can also change, just so you're familiar. If you've already been watching the calendar this month, you are clearly aware of this. These sometimes change often in a month. So if you are planning to attend, check into the link that you see here. This is the one that is always updated immediately when I know something. This link and our Discord has an events channel. I change those at the same time. So going to professormesser.com/calendar will always give you the latest information that you need. Well, we do one of these study groups, but we also have time set aside for what we call our after show. I've just spent an hour asking you questions. I think it's only fair that you ask me some questions. And you can do that by submitting your questions in those same links we've been using so far at professormesser.com/QA. We also, of course, have our course notes. We mentioned those earlier. You can find that along with downloadable versions of our video course and much more at our website, professormesser.com/netsuccess. And if you are in the US or Canada, you might even want to think about saving some money when you're ready to take your exam by purchasing your voucher on the Professor Messer website. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. We are a platinum partner of CompTIA, so you can know and trust that you are getting your voucher from someone who is directly supported by the folks at CompTIA. This is also more links on our website. If you want to find us, we're on Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. And if you haven't joined our YouTube channel yet, how have you not subscribed? In fact, if you're watching this video, this might even be a great time to give us a little thumbs up right there in the video screen. It really does help us get visibility with the folks at YouTube. And I'm sure it does something with that algorithm. What does it do? I have no idea. But I think we should probably hit that thumbs up. It would be a great idea, and I would certainly appreciate it. Something you can do for free that really does help us quite a bit. And other links here, you can always follow us on X, on Instagram, and other places. We want to be exactly where you are as well. Well, that brings us to the end of our first section of this study group. Stick around for our after show coming up in just a moment, just a few seconds. Stay right where you are. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. All right, I'm going to take a sip. We do have a LinkedIn. What would it be? ProfessorMesser.com/LinkedIn. See how that works? And I will tell you, the LinkedIn that we have there is a LinkedIn page. I, of course, have my own personal LinkedIn, but my own personal LinkedIn, I do not include or add people that I have not directly worked with. Sorry. So if you're looking to, well, that's not the link I wanted. That's the one I wanted. There we go. So if you are someone who you want to join my LinkedIn network, we would need to work together for that to have happened. So I have a very narrow grouping of people that are directly related in my LinkedIn. But we do have a Professor Messer page where I have my daily pop quiz questions there. You can post messages there. And just yet another community we have on social media, and it's at ProfessorMesser.com/LinkedIn. Well, it's time for the after show. Really, it was time for the after show 30 minutes ago, but I was just talking way too much. So instead of that, instead of us getting there 30 minutes ago, we're there now. So we got there eventually, right? Fantastic. So what I want to do is now go to the questions that you have submitted during this time frame, and you can continue to submit questions. I'll put the link on the screen right there. You can go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA, and I will be glad to take any questions you would like to ask of me about the industry, about technology, about industry certifications, about working in IT, about working in cybersecurity, about designing and implementing enterprise type networks, about what I had for breakfast. I'll take any of your questions. I don't know if I'll answer that one, but there are a number of those I can certainly answer as we go through the details of this. There was one in the chat room that came through that's probably a good place to start. The question from Legend Gamer asks, how many IT jobs have you worked and what are the job titles? Well, tell me a little bit about yourself, as they say. It's like we're getting interviewed already in the chat room. My career in IT, everything I've done has been IT. My degree, my 4-year degree that I got from Florida State University is one in business management. So I didn't get a technical degree, quote unquote, from Florida State, but I did get a business degree, for better or worse. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. But everything I've done from a career perspective has always been a technical job. I think one of my first technical positions was when I was a student at Florida State. I worked at the Florida State Computing Center. It used to be in the basement of the Love Building. Yep, L-O-V-E. It's name of a person, the Love Building. No longer there. They moved out to Innovation Park, a real place again, where all of the computing systems, I think even today, are still out there. The mainframes and other large systems are out there. I'm just not sure how much these days. But worked there as a computer operator. So perfect for a student. You're effectively babysitting mainframe computers and supercomputers. So you're studying. This means I'm studying up for all my courses, and I'm watching to see when the clock stops on the mainframe, which happens. You know, on your computer, how you hit the number lock on your keyboard to see if it will light up and the light go off to see if it's responding to you from your hardware. It's sort of a similar thing on the mainframe. You're looking for the clock to stop going. Out of school, I got a job working as a field service technician at a computer center store in South Miami, of all places. And from there, jumped to more of a corporate environment about 9 months, a year later, and started working for, at the time, John Alden Life Insurance in Miami. It was a building with these big black buildings right next to the Miami airport. And I worked there like 5 or 6 years. And I worked on I was part of their help desk. They called us IT service desk. I worked as a workstation admin, configuration administrator, primarily for Windows rollouts and that automation of Windows rollouts, scripting and that type of thing. Moved into network administration there with a focus on really understanding what was happening on the network protocols. We designed wide area networks and implemented those wide area networks, instituted new routing configurations, new switch setups. We built new buildings and ran fiber between the buildings and connected the buildings together and switched and routed. Just an amazing place to be for learning technologies like that, and was able to take that foundational knowledge and move up into the manufacturer's world. So I went from working as an IT person in an insurance company to working as a systems engineer for a protocol analysis company, specifically Network General, the manufacturer of the sniffer, and worked there about 7 years as a systems engineer or senior systems engineer because it was something different every day. Plus, you are learning a lot about the technology. You have to be an expert when you are representing that product. You have to really know the product. And what's more fun than protocol analysis? I know, that's me. That's how my mind works. This is fantastic. And once we got into that, the world of cybersecurity was exploding. And the cybersecurity part of it allowed me to move from Network General, which had been bought by McAfee and turned into Network Associates, and then divested from them and turned back into Network General, and then purchased at that point by NetScout. That was that entire run from Network General on. It was about a 7 or 8 year period. And it was interesting, but I wanted to do more. And knowing what happens at the protocol level gives you an interesting insight into the world of IT security. And I was able to leverage that knowledge into becoming a systems engineer at Palo Alto Networks. And so that's where I spent, I guess that was my last corporate job, if you want to look at it that way, where I supported and represented those technologies. That's why you hear me talk a lot about installing firewalls and evaluations and seeing information on some of these enormous enterprise networks, some of the biggest networks and companies in the world. I've been fortunate enough to be in their data centers, talking with their people, implementing and designing network security technologies, and a remarkable job. Just something you learn every day, something new. You see something new every day. It was remarkable. And all of that, in the midst of all of that, the internet, of course, exploded. And I found that there were a lot of people that really needed to understand more about how to get into the world of IT and how they could provide them with a way to either get their first job or get a better job and really train the next generation of IT professionals. And that's where all of this came from. That's where this crazy experiment really happened. And so all of the things that we've built here and the things we have on the internet really came from that foundational knowledge that I created in IT through the years and ultimately am able to share with you. So whenever I talk about these protocols and planning and implementing SNMP traps and designing and putting in these wide area network configurations, it's coming from a very personal place because those were the things that I did. In the chat, someone asked, did you ran fiber between buildings? Did you dig the tunnels? Well, in that particular case, no, but I have put in conduit before in my own home. Not a big fan of digging my own tunnels. In that particular case, we did contract to have someone else dig the tunnels. In fact, my employer would not allow me to do any type of construction. They were not insured for that. So we had a third party come in to dig the tunnels, put in the conduit, run the fiber on both ends. Somebody else came in and terminated the fiber and put it into a patch, and that's where they handed it over to me. So we did run fiber between buildings. We designed and implemented, we designed, purchased, and implemented the fiber runs, but we did not dig them ourselves. But I'm fine digging some fiber runs. And for those of you that followed us through the years, we used to have a birdhouse in the backyard. We had a camera on it, a 24/7 camera, and very interesting technologies we were able to do with that, streaming on the internet. And I ran conduit so we could run some Ethernet outside. We ran it all with copper outside. I did not use fiber for that connection. In retrospect, I probably should have, but that's the scenario we were in to be able to work with that. Let's go now, shift gears back to the questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, you can do that at any time using that link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your question. And I'm going to sift through the ones we have here to see what I could find for you to answer. There is, let's talk to this one. This is probably one of the more common questions I get about these. So let me get rid of the poll that I have on this screen. There's a lot of clicking I suddenly have to do. Here we go. And let's go to questions that you are submitting. I do have a question here. This one's from Laura. We have, what topics do you see students struggling the most with the Network Plus exam? This is this is the top 10 question for sure. So you are spot on with trying to figure out where do you go with this. And of course, the broad answer, if I can answer that, I will get to the crux of the question. But the broad answer is all of the topics you need to know for the exam. There is no specific topic that I can point to, because you've got, let me bring up the exam objectives again. There's a lot of stuff in these objectives. And looking at the bullets that we have here, there's really no weighting between the bullets. For example, if I look at, let's go to this section here. So we got section 3.3 and section 3.4. Section 3.3 is explain disaster recovery concepts. Section 3.4 is given a scenario, implement IPv4 and IPv6 network services. Those are very different in topics. And there's a lot of bullets here as well. For example, under disaster recovery metrics, we need to understand recovery point objective, or RPO. What is that? How do we measure that? What's important about that? And if we look in section 3.4, we need to know about domain name system security extensions, or DNSSEC. Two just random bullets I picked on this link. So we looked at recovery point objective. Let me see if I can annotate a little bit here. We'll get some color on that. So recovery point objective is one of them, and domain system security extensions is the other one. So two different bullets. Those are completely different technologies. They really don't have anything to do with each other. They are in different sections, obviously, because they don't have anything to do with each other. But you have to know both of them, because you could be asked about either one of them, or you could be asked about both of them on your exam. Now, because there are hundreds of objectives in this list, and you'll only get a maximum of 90 questions, much of this list of exam objectives you'll never see on the exam. And admittedly, that is very frustrating for people, and I get it. You're absolutely right. You have to learn all of this information, and they only ask you about 90 things. That seems like, shouldn't you ask me about everything? I feel like you should, but that's not the way industry certifications exams work. That is something that is not specific to CompTIA. It's the same thing on Microsoft. It's the same thing on VMware. It's the same thing on Palo Alto Network certifications. It's the same thing on Amazon certifications. That's just the way IT certifications tend to work. One of the things about this is that some of these topics, though, are a bit more frustrating for folks than others. And I think we sometimes create an environment where we are really focused on a particular topic, perhaps even unnecessarily. Let me give you an example of this. So I mentioned earlier, let me make sure I can find what I'm looking for here. Okay, so let's go back to the main objective list. So on the Network Plus exam, when you go to the exam room, they present the exam to you. 23% of the questions will be from Domain 1 networking concepts. That means 77% of the exam will be in the rest of these domains, domains 2, 3, 4, and 5. So about 23% of the exam is section 1. Let's look at section 1. So almost a quarter of the questions you will get on your exam will be about OSI reference. They'll be about applications, appliances, and functions. They'll be about cloud concepts and connectivity options. There are a bunch of port numbers here that are included with that. There is transmission media and transceivers. There is network topologies, architectures, and types. There's IP4 network addressing, and there is evolving use cases for modern network environments. Within that, there must be, I don't know the total number of objectives here, but it's got to be close to 100. There's maybe 80, 75, 80 objectives that are in this list. Well, with 90 questions on the exam, we're just going to round up to 100 to make the math easy. 23 of the questions on your exam might be related to networking concepts, probably just under that, because I'm working with round numbers here, but it's probably less than 23. You might get 20 questions about networking concepts. Yeah, but there's 100 topics here. So about only a tiny amount of this, of section 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8 will ever appear on the exam. Okay, well, that's not hard to understand. That makes sense when you start doing the math. But here's where it doesn't make sense, is that when people are going through this, you learn a little bit about routers, you learn about switches. Here's some port numbers. That's really just rote memorization. It's not too complex to understand. But then in your studies, you get down to section 1.7, where there's a section called subnetting. And you need to learn about variable length subnet mask, or VLSM, and CIDR, which is classless interdomain routing. This is the bane of many people starting into the world of networking. This is a challenge because it is a relatively complex set of mathematical things you have to do to figure out how to subnet a network, to figure out how to work with variable length subnet masking, VLSM. This is where a lot of people, I think, get trapped into a time sink where they are spending so much time trying to understand the detailed concepts behind subnetting. And maybe you're not great with math. Maybe the concepts of subnetting aren't hitting quite right for you. Maybe the shortcuts we have aren't quite fitting your particular style of shortcuts, and you're just not getting the overall perspective. Sometimes you'll often hear people talk about subnetting as you're not going to get it, you're not going to get it, you're not going to get it, and then suddenly it'll click. There'll be a ding, and suddenly you understand what's going on. And that's actually not too far from the truth. But getting past that curve, that learning curve, to finally get to the point of understanding subnetting can be very time consuming for people. But when you look at the exam objectives, that set of subnetting, which is really specifically variable length subnet mask, is really what we're talking about. That's subnetting. That is one bullet in this huge section that has almost 80 to 100 objectives inside of it that ultimately will only make up 23% of your exam. This means if you do the math, subnetting, you might get one question on subnetting. You could get two. If the random number generator was being completely awful that day, you might get three. But I have had people report to me, perhaps in violation of their candidate agreement, they have said, well, I didn't get any subnetting questions on my exam. An exact number of 0 subnetting questions. So when people say, which is the hardest topics, I sometimes will point to subnetting, but I also temper that with, this might be a difficult concept to completely understand, but you do need to know it for a career in networking. It is an incredibly important one to be able to understand that concept. But if you're spending a week studying that one objective within this larger group of 80 to 100 objectives that ultimately will only make up 23% of the exam, you might be spending way too much time on this when you could have been spending that time learning many other objectives that are in this document so that you will be that much better on the exam. So I don't want to tell you not to study something, but I do want to tell you to be very particular and careful about how much time you're spending on any particular topic, because you're not going to get 20 questions about subnetting on your exam. As I mentioned, subnetting is incredibly important. You need to know it. You need to know how to do it in your head, at least to some degree, to be able to work in networking, because you'll often be presented with information and at an instant you need to understand what's going on. It might be a routing table. It might be a configuration of a device. It might be a VLAN configuration setting. It might be a dynamic routing setup that you're doing. You need to know subnetting. You need to know CIDR block notation. It's super important. And if you take a higher level networking exam, like a Cisco exam, the Cisco exam I took, I feel like half the exam was subnetting. It probably wasn't. It was probably only 25% of the exam, which is still a lot. There was a lot of subnetting on the Cisco exams. And that's why one of the shortcuts I put into my course is the 7-second subnetting that I did. That was a method of subnetting that I made for myself because I wanted to go through an entire exam and never have to do any math, specifically multiplication and division. Obviously, in my shortcut, you have to add and subtract 1. That's not math. That's easy. So we're not counting that as math. But that's how the 7-second subnetting shortcut came from. It came from taking those higher level certification exams and not wanting to have to do math, because I knew if I did math, I would get it wrong and then the question would be incorrect. But if I already had the charts set up and I just put my finger here, and the answer is that, I can just keep moving very quickly. And I know I got the answer right because there was no math involved. I literally followed my own table and I was done. And I could do it very quickly, really in less than 7 seconds. So something to think about if you're planning to take a Cisco exam, a Palo Alto Networks exam, or some other higher level networking certification, you're going to need to know subnetting. It's incredibly important. But for the Network Plus, relatively small. So when people like Laura ask, what do I see people struggling the most with? Rote memorization is always a struggle. Some of these higher level topics like subnetting that can be really time sinks, those people struggle with. But perhaps the overall larger problem is just time management, is you're spending too much time on the wrong things and should be spending that time on other topics. So that's what I'd say is the biggest struggle. And if you are already familiar with the objectives, you already downloaded them, you're using them, you're annotating them, you are writing on these objectives, they are your checklist, then I don't think you run into that problem. I think you're in pretty good shape. And that's why you'll hear me constantly tell people, don't deal with what's in there. You want to focus on the objectives. Don't listen to what anybody else is telling you. Just go to the objectives and you'll do fine. And it can be frustrating because I have seen other websites out there that have told you that the objectives aren't that important. They have no idea what they're talking about. They've never taken this exam, obviously, or they would know that CompTIA sticks to those objectives almost 100%. The only time you may see a deviation from them is that CompTIA does this. They will occasionally put a question on the exam that is not in the exam objectives. And they do this intentionally to see what you answer. When they do this, as we understand it from CompTIA, that question is not graded. So the part that I don't like about that is that it takes you out of the mode that you're in of sticking to the objectives. You're expecting what's coming up on the screen, and then you're sidelined by this weird question that's asking about something that you never studied. And now you're wondering, is this something that CompTIA put in there? Did I miss something? Is there a page of the objectives that I didn't study? What other things are, it throws you off for the exam. I don't like that strategy that they do. I don't like what CompTIA is doing there, but if that's the worst we have to worry about, I think we're doing pretty well. So just keep that in mind. If you know it's coming and you see something pop up that's not in your list of objectives, you'll know immediately what that is, and that won't faze you. So just keep that in mind as well if you do that. And I have in the past, and I continue to do this, I've told people, if you're spending a week on subnetting and you still don't get it, just put it to the side. Because there's so few questions you'll get on the exam, you maybe just don't even study that part. Just study every other objective, and I think you'll be okay. You'll still pass the exam, certainly. Let's keep going through your list of questions. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but I'll squeeze in a couple more. I know we just talked way too much and went into overtime on today's session. I apologize. Let's keep going through this. A lot of great questions here. A lot of people are asking me, and I sort of get these questions all the time. But as I mentioned, this version of the Network Plus exam is not going away until the end of next calendar year of 2027. So people do ask, okay, what happens then? What's going to be on the new exam? How's it going to be like? Are there going to be a lot of changes? Is it going to be? Well, we don't have to worry about that right now. And I really, really implore you not to worry about any of that. You've got plenty of time to study from the existing exam objectives. And I have looked through what will be eventually the final objectives. They're in a draft form now, but I've looked through the objectives that are coming in that version of the exam that's now a year and a half from now. And not much has changed. In fact, there was a message that came up on Reddit, I think it was yesterday I saw, that somebody had a book of like the N10-005 exam. This is really the great thing about networking. They had an N10-005 book. Remember, the current version of the exam is the N10-009. So they were 4 versions behind. And when you count 3 years for each of those versions, that's from 12 years ago. Did I do my math okay? I think I did. So that's a long time ago to have dealt with that. But I thought, well, what would have been different in that book? Of course, you should be studying from materials that match the same version of the exam you plan to take. But I thought, do I have a copy of the 005? Because I did do a course for the N10-005 12 years ago, and I have the objectives. So let's look through the objectives and let's see what's different, shall we? This will be fun. So I have the objectives right here. They are in a different format. This is the exam objectives for the N10-005. Again, these are super old and have nothing to do with the current exam, just so you're aware. This is something we're just doing for fun here as we go through it. So again, not much difference with the domains: network concepts, network installation configuration, network media, network management, network security, similar distribution, but nothing too super unusual. And you can see even the first section, compare the layers of OSI and IP models. So already we're seeing a little bit different. That's because the OSI model is currently part of the N10-009. The TCP/IP model was dropped. Well, let me see if I can show it to you a little bit better. Why don't I put this in a rolling form here? This form was dropped. The TCP/IP model, if I scroll back up, was dropped out of the Network Plus exam. Well, that's because nobody uses the TCP/IP model. In fact, the only time I've ever seen this model used is in a class that talks about the TCP/IP model. That's the only time you will ever see it. It exists only to be educated about. It exists only in a book. We never use it for anything else. So we dropped it because we've used the OSI model to describe networking since forever, since we created OSI. And ironically, and this is the irony of these models, of course, is the models are describing a way that data is moved from one part of the network to the other. And so the OSI model and the TCP/IP model are describing the same thing. There was at one time an OSI protocol, and the OSI model was created and based on that OSI protocol. And of course, as you already know, there is a TCP/IP set of protocols as well, and we still use those protocols today. The irony here is that we use the OSI model to describe traffic and application and data flows across the network, but OSI as a protocol doesn't exist anymore. The TCP/IP protocol suite does exist, and yet we don't use that to describe anything about data flows. That's welcome to the way we do things in the world. That's sort of the way it works. But you can see there's already a change. So if you read that book on the N10-005, you're learning things that are unnecessary that are never going to appear on your exam. This is why I tell you all the time, only study from materials that match the version of the exam that you're planning to take. Important. Other things, OSI model and the things we need to know about, very similar to the current exam. And that's the thing I found in here, is that a lot of the information in this list, very, very similar to what we are learning today in the most recent version. A lot of this has been removed. Some of these are a little bit outdated. We certainly have more port numbers that are listed now. Let's just keep scrolling through some of these other things. Only a few DNS records listed. Only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The A, MX, Quad A, CNAME, and PTR. Well, now, of course, we need to know a lot more than that. DNS has become a lot more important than that. The network troubleshooting methodology was removed in the latest version of Network Plus. I think it was, wasn't it? Maybe that was just A+. I bet it will be removed in the next one as well. We have network installation, NAT, PAT, VLAN. So very similar in many ways. Obviously, some of the things that are in here have been removed. A lot of new topics have been added. A lot of the rote memorization has been removed from the latest Network Plus. Let me show you how fortunate you are. Look at all the different copper configurations you need to know, all the different copper cabling types that are there. The fiber cabling types are about the same. The thing that is big and different, WAN technologies. Look at all these different WAN technologies you need to know. Most of these we don't use anymore. We don't use T1 E1 anymore, T3 E3, DS3, Sonnet, maybe if you're a service provider. DWDM you might use, but it's even a little bit passe since we have such high-speed Ethernet these days. ISDN, doing a lot of that, probably only with voice-type communication or for connections to a traditional PBX if you still have one of those sitting around. But that's a good example. Another one I saw in here, let me scroll down to this. Here it is. All the different Ethernet standards. We had to know all of these. The 1000 base T, the 100 base TX, the 100 base FX, the 1000 base X, the 10G base SR. These are things you probably won't run very much into. And indeed, it was just too much memorization. So when I tell you only study from materials that match the latest version, I really do mean it. You'll be studying things that are unnecessary and even studying things that no longer appear on the exam at all. And of course, you'd be missing all the new stuff. So you're almost guaranteed to fail in that scenario. Make sure you are very familiar when you start going through this. Let's go with more questions that you have submitted. A lot of great stuff came through. So let's go into the questions that you have here. Let me take this and move it to my archive. There we go. I mentioned within that first hour that I gave you a way that you could earn a webinar category CEU. This is a continuing education unit credit, primarily used for renewing an existing CompTIA certification, but CEUs are used by many different manufacturers, and the CEUs you earn here could possibly be used for things that are outside the scope of CompTIA, certainly. So I make them available regardless of how you are going to use them. But Fox asks, what's the best way to keep up with CEUs? And by this, I'm assuming you mean how you find places to earn CEUs, or do you mean just how you track them? I don't know which one of those. Tracking seems easy. You can read a spreadsheet, put it in a notes. You can see how many CEUs you've accumulated. And on the CompTIA website, you can submit the CEUs and you can track the submission of those CEUs as part of your renewal process on the CompTIA website. But CEUs are in different places and different things, and you can earn CEUs by doing a lot of different things, not just attending a live event online. In fact, you can only attend a certain number of those. And even if you attended, I think it's 30 CEUs to renew a Network Plus, unfortunately, you can't watch 30 of these events. I mean, you can, but you can't earn 30 CEUs from that. They limit the number of CEUs that you can accumulate for any particular category. So a webinar category CEU for Network Plus, you may only be able to accumulate 5 CEUs in a 3-year period. So that's just an example. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but it's probably close to that. And if you need 30, you can see that you don't get the 30, which means you have to do other things to accumulate CEUs in different categories. I do have a video on it's in the YouTube video description of this video on how to renew your certification in just a few hours. Your A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus in just a few hours. And it's primarily a conversation about the CertMaster CE, which is a way to renew your certification that does not require you to collect CEUs. It's sort of an online training that brings you up to date with the latest exam objectives, and you can submit everything electronically. And in about a day, you can renew your cert. If you're getting down to the final days before your certification expires, I really recommend doing that. It doesn't cost much more than collecting CEUs. You can do it in a day and boom, you're upgraded. You're now renewed for another 3 years. It's an easy thing to do. Something to think about that's called CertMaster CE. But you could take a higher level certification from CompTIA. You could take certifications from different third parties. You can perform these other CEU functions. There's a lot of different ways to renew your cert. There's a lot of flexibility here. The CompTIA website documents all of this, and I tried to put it in a summarized form in that video where I cover more than just CertMaster CE. I cover all of those other methods as well. That may be something you want to look at if you're planning to renew your certification. Let's do some more questions that you have submitted. I realize we're after the top of the hour, but again, trying to make hay while the sun is indeed shining. We have quite a bit of good questions that have come in. Thank you for sending these, by the way. Let's talk more job market questions. This is a question that's a lot of questions there. This is the question from Shane, who asks, I have 4 hours of help desk experience in various roles. How can I leverage Network Plus certification in the job market? Network Plus tends to be all about networking, as the name implies. A+, very focused on operating systems and hardware, a little bit of networking, a little bit of security, but certainly a good entry-level cert. Networking is considered to be the next level up in the world of CompTIA's list of certifications. And above that is Security Plus. But as you're probably aware, different jobs ask for different things. And your certifications ideally need to match what a prospective employer would like to see from you. And of course, not just your certifications, but your experience, your knowledge, perhaps even other things as well. There is yet another video. It's on the YouTube video description of this video, which is how to get a job in IT with no experience. And yours here, you have 4 hours of help desk experience in various roles. Did you mean something other than 4 hours? Because that's almost no help desk experience. You were there half a day. I think you meant something else when you put that in. Especially if it's various roles. I had one role an hour. We did half a day. We broke for lunch. I just didn't come back. It's 4 hours. What can I do with that? I don't think that was your question. I think I'm misunderstanding the question. The leverage of a certification, the benefit of earning an industry certification is you're able to prove to a prospective employer that you have a certain foundational knowledge in a set of topics. Now, are you an expert in those topics? You are not. But nobody has ever said that by passing an industry certification that you are an expert. I often hear really a straw man argument on the internet. Yeah, you passed your certification, but you're not an expert. No, of course not, because that's not what a certification does. But practical experience is more useful and more powerful than certifications. Well, I guess it could be, but it's different than a certification. Having practical knowledge is an important thing to bring to the table. If you're looking for a job, you really need 4 things to present to a prospective employer. You need a formal education of some kind. Most employers are looking for a 2 or 4 year degree. You need that degree. Many employers are also looking for industry certification. So they're looking for an A+, a Network Plus, a Security Plus, an Amazon, a Microsoft, a Red Hat, a Cisco, some other type of cert. And they probably have that listed in their job description. The third thing is you have some type of practical experience. And notice I say practical and not professional, because if you don't have a job yet in IT, then you've not been paid for your knowledge. But there are opportunities to get experience without being paid, whether it's a volunteer at a nonprofit. Maybe you work with somebody who's already working in the field and they can bring you in on an ad hoc basis when they need more arms and legs to be able to rack new equipment or to string new cable or whatever it happens to be. Getting these little projects on the weekend can be very, very useful, not just in putting things down on your resume and saying, yes, I've done this, but it also teaches you a lot, and you learn a lot by doing these things yourself. And the fourth element that I find really important when getting a job, and it's probably the one element most dismissed or missing when somebody puts in their job posting or replies to a job posting, is someone who already works at that company. We like to hire people we know, and we like to hire people that other people within the organization know. Because you're not a stranger coming in from off the street, we're going to invest time and money and bring you in and get you trained and put you into the getting the tickets and doing the network and running the cables. But what if you just interviewed well and you really didn't know anything? But nobody's there to vouch for you to say, no, he really does know something. And I've worked with him. I know him from this place, or we work together at that company, or I know him from the Microsoft user group meeting, or he's been to the Cisco meetings and he did a presentation. So the things you do and the people you know are very important. And we sometimes dismiss that as being inappropriate or not good. We're not saying that they're part of their family. We're just saying that professionally you know each other. This is one of the great benefits that you have when creating a LinkedIn profile. And I do get pushback when I tell people, do you have a good LinkedIn profile? Have you set up your LinkedIn profile? Do you have people connecting to you over LinkedIn? The projects that you do in your home lab, have you posted anything about those on LinkedIn? People sometimes dismiss things like social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, other places, because there is a lot of nonsense on some of these social media sites. Let's be clear. That's fair. There's a good argument to be made there. But there's also a lot of good you can create. It's your page on LinkedIn. I mean, if you make it an awful page, it's an awful page. But if you're putting there the experiences that you've had, the places that you've gone and worked, the things that you have created, reports that you've created from your lab at home. You've got a home lab where you installed a new firewall, and there's a bunch of reports you've created. Put them on your LinkedIn, because employers will go out and they will look through all of your social media. Absolutely. I think we all pretty much realize this at this point, that they are looking for everything they can about you. And if they're running into your LinkedIn and it's full of projects that you've done, and you're looking at reports that have been generated and a network diagram of your home lab and a set of screenshots, the things that you found that were interesting when you put this lab together, problems that you solved in the lab, those are valuable to an employer. Not only to see the process you used when you're troubleshooting, but the fact that you had a home lab at all is quite impressive and unusual, sadly. So that's one of the things I mentioned in that video, how to get a job in IT with no experience, is because there's an opportunity there to promote yourself. And I don't think we market ourselves quite as well as we should when we're going out for these jobs. People tend to create a single resume. They throw that single resume at a company. They wait to hear something, and they just keep throwing resumes out. Maybe they throw 100 resumes at a time. Did they do a cover letter for the resume? They did not. Did they modify the resume to customize it for each one of the jobs that they are posting to? They did not. Do they know anybody who works in these organizations? Well, they never leave their house. Of course they don't. You do have to put together a strategy. You have to put together a plan, and you have to learn and promote yourself when you're trying to get a job in IT, when you're trying to get a job anywhere. Quite honestly, this just happens to be IT that we are talking about, but that's what you need to do. I talk about different home labs you can work on in that video, how to get an IT job with no experience. And there's probably things you can think of to do a lab. If you're doing networking, plug in a couple switches, a router, add a firewall, do an IPS configuration on a firewall with some configurations, maybe set up your home network with separate VLANs, one for yourself, maybe your office, another VLAN for the house in general, another VLAN. Maybe you have cameras in your home. A lot of homes now have cameras. They're relatively inexpensive now. Maybe there's a separate VLAN for your cameras and your security systems. Maybe a separate VLAN for your IoT devices, which is, by the way, a great idea. Well, you're going to need equipment that can support those different VLANs. You're going to need to configure all of those different VLANs. You're going to need to set IP address configurations for each of those VLANs. And then you're going to have to physically move those devices and plug them in to the right interfaces on the switch so that they are using those VLANs. And all of that has to be able to be secured and routed to and from each other and to and from the internet. There's a good project. Document all of that. Put it on your LinkedIn. Put it in a report, write it up, have a diagram, show it to people, let them know that you know how to do these things. So that is the idea. When I focus on what do I need to know, how do I use these certifications in the job market, there's no guarantees on any of these things. I think we wish that you get your Network Plus and you are somehow guaranteed a job somewhere, but it does not work that way. It's never worked that way. There are no guarantees, but the better strategy you have and the more of these things you accumulate and the more knowledge you are building, the better chance you have at getting one of those positions. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is 100%, but there are ways you can move up in the list above other people that are fighting for those same positions, and eventually you're going to be the one at the top. So it's one of those scenarios where if you're not good at rejection, you will become very good at rejection very soon. So it's one of the worst things. I remember the first job I really wanted out of college. It was in a very large consulting firm. I thought I would be great at doing this. It would be a lot of fun. It's a corporate environment. They make a lot of money. They're in these nice buildings. What a great place to work. That's where I want to work. And I put all of my efforts into that interview. I put all of my efforts into getting that job with that consulting company. And they sent me a letter and I opened it and it said, no, we're not going to hire you. I was crushed. What do you mean you're not going to hire me? What are you taught? But I had such a good interview. It went so well. I would love to know what happened. And of course, one of my buddies, because I was in college at the time, one of my buddies said, we went out this weekend and you were rejected many, many, many times. Well, thank you, my friend. I'm so glad you're here. He goes, no, this is just another one. You should be used to this by now. And he wasn't wrong. He's absolutely correct. Okay. Well, if you approach it with the idea that nothing is guaranteed and that you just have to position yourself as best you can for that particular position, then you've done everything you could. It wasn't a love connection. It wasn't a match. And ultimately, when I got into the industry and I learned more about what they did really at that consulting company and how they were evaluated and how that company looked at them for revenue generation and bringing in dollars, kind of glad I didn't get that job. So although the grass is indeed very green over there, you really might not be seeing the entire lawn. So you might want to have a different perspective of these jobs and find one that really is a good match for you. I've stumbled through a lot of different jobs in my career, and I had this time where I'd be in a really great job. I talked about some of these early on in the study group, but I also had jobs in between that I really didn't talk about where I'd be there for 9 months to a year, and it was just not a good job. It was just not a good connection. I thought it would be a good job, but it wasn't. There was red flags I completely ignored at the beginning, as we tend to do as humans. And after a year, I realized it's time to move on. And then the next one I was much better prepared for, and I got a better job, and I was happier there and stayed there a number of years. That happens. Sometimes you make great decisions, sometimes you don't. And it's not one you should be emotionally charged up about. Keep looking, keep finding the right jobs out there, and you will find it. And the great thing about IT is there's a lot of positions out there that are available. The positions are changing all the time. New technologies show up all the time. New technologies go away all the time. I think we're starting to see some of those kind of fade away a little bit. We've been pummeled with certain technologies for the last year and a half, 2 years. And now we're starting to see a shift in the industry a bit. So that's one of the things that I think is great about this particular industry is nothing ever stays the same. Certainly technology is not going away, but we need to make sure that we are prepared for whatever happens to show up. And the better you are at learning these topics, the better you are at understanding these technologies, of using and implementing these technologies, then you will be much better shape when it finally comes time to getting that either first job in IT or your next job in IT. That's going to be the most important part for you. And maybe that positions you pretty well for what is going to be the next step in my career. This, by the way, never stops in the world of IT. If you're thinking you do all these certifications, you get the paper, you get that first job in IT, and you're done, whew, boy, it was that learning part. That was something. Glad that's over. No, you're just getting started. Nothing in IT stays the same day to day. There are constant changes, new things happening all the time, new things in security, new networking technologies, new operating system functionality, new security features you have to enable or disable or find ways around. These are just a common thing that we do in our industry. You will never stop learning. There will always be more complex problems to solve. There will always be more and newer technologies that come down the line, and the newer technologies have new problems to solve. The only way you're going to keep up with that is by constantly learning, constantly being put onto these projects, constantly reading, constantly watching videos. This doesn't end. But the fun part about it is you are accumulating a foundational knowledge that you will then use to level up into your next part of your career. So although you might start at the help desk And many people think of that as, well, now I'm stuck at the help desk my career. No. We're going to move you out of the help desk in a year. If you're good enough to move out of the help desk, that's what we're using to have you kind of sift through and understand our particular environment. We're also checking to see how you are with this technology and figure out where should your next spot be. Should we move you into desktop administration, server administration? Are you a Linux person? Do we put you on the network team? Should we get you over in the security operations center? Would you be best in the data center? Is databases your thing? Whatever it happens to be, you will then start moving into that part of IT. And the great part about this is in 2 to 3 years, something else emerges. There will be a new technology. There will be new things that you want to learn, and then you'll move into that particular area. So you have great benefits. You're in the right place. You are in a position of learning in this particular field of, just broadly speaking, information technology. You're in a field where you can do anything you would like to do. You just need to learn it first. And then you can move and start working in that particular area. Otherwise, I would still be working as a field service technician. But I was able to move into operating systems and then move into servers and then move into networking and ultimately into security. That was a 25-year path, but I got there by going through a number of different jobs in the meantime to get me there. In IT, we stay somewhere 3 or 4 years and we're off to the next thing. It tends to be a common theme because there's so much going on in this industry and so many demands on the things that we do. And quite honestly, there's just not enough smart people in this industry. We need more smart people. The economies will constantly go up and down. I have been through so many highs and so many lows with the economic environment, where there's a lot of IT jobs available. There's not enough IT jobs available. There's a lot of IT jobs available. There's not enough, but there are always some. And if anything, I know that right now it seems like we're almost ready to emerge from a low from an economic perspective as far as IT jobs are concerned. And I have a feeling we're going to start creeping up here very shortly, even more. But you'll be ready for it. And when that happens, you'll be able to move to the right place because you spent the time learning the content, building the foundation, and positioning yourself to get that first job in IT or that next job in IT that you will be perfectly positioned for. You got to put in the work first. We always talk about luck as being that preparation, and that really is what we're talking about. In fact, that job I got, my last corporate job, was at Palo Alto Networks. And the only reason I even knew that job was available is somebody I worked with 5 years ago called me out of the blue and said, I just saw this job posting. I'm going to go work in sales in that particular place. You should really have a look because I'd love you to come over and be the systems engineer to my sales side. I thought, Palo Alto, who? What are you talking about? At the time, they were a small company. They were just getting started. They were not a public company. So it was a startup. I'm like, a startup? Really? Palo Alto Networks? That's never going to amount to anything. He said, just have a look. And I went and looked at their technology and thought, is this real? This looks fake. This is so good. This has to be fake. No, they had just created a whole new world of security that no one had ever seen before. And I immediately thought, I need to be part of that. So I begged and pleaded to get a job with them. They did not want to hire me. They almost did not hire me, but ultimately I think they just got a lot of leverage from people who worked there already knew me. And so that was a big part of me getting that position. You should position yourself to be ready for that call. Regardless of where that is in your career, regardless of your knowledge base, regardless of the foundation that you have, keep building the foundation. You have to be ready at an instant to move up, move over, and take that next level position. If you're in the room and you already know everything they're talking about, you're in the wrong room. You need to always keep pushing yourself. So yes, get your Network Plus, get the certification, learn about the OSI model, learn about subnetting, learn about all of these different technologies and how they connect together and how the wired works and how the wireless works, what the cables are like, learn all of that. And then once you've learned it, move up into something else you know nothing about and keep doing that constantly. If you do that, you're going to have a very long and very illustrious career in the world of information technology. Well, that brings us, I think, at a good stopping point for the things that we are doing today. If you're working on your Network Plus, keep working on your Network Plus. Networking is the foundation of everything we do in information technology, and it really does bring all the glue together and help you understand how all of these different technologies interact and work with everything else that we are doing. I want to thank you all for joining us on our Network Plus study group today. We've also got the next Network Plus study group already in the schedule. I need to add those to my calendar. I will work on that very soon. So you'll see that pop up. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, always check our official calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. And of course, on our website, you can sign up for our weekly Network Plus pop quiz to be delivered into your inbox. You can also find that on our Facebook page, on our LinkedIn page, and other places around the internet. Certainly on our website as well. Great place to go. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Come back in a couple weeks for our Security Plus study group. Thank you so much for joining us today. We always have such a good time, and we could not do this without you. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.